Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a young black man doing all that I can to stay. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind every day, I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough trouble. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live. I was just a black boy brought up in the white world. I just wanna ask God if I'm in the right world. Is my life a test or is my life a curse? They put us in an ambulance, got us in a hearse. Cause another brother deceased, but it doesn't matter. Killed by the police while we in the handcuffs. I don't wanna take a knee, I just wanna stand up. Where's the new call the Black Panthers? Just do the math, they subtract us like minus. Fuck COVID, KKK is the virus. We are not afraid, we will not stay quiet. They will always label a rebellion or riot. Kill a black man seems to be their assignment. White supremacists terrorize the environment. Guns and the canine, tasers and sirens. I just wanna live, I don't wanna live violent. We don't want violence. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough trouble. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
Amazing.
That was the first video. We're gonna play another video.
We'll be playing the video while we give time for people
to join in. Yes.
Join us.
Deep talk, communicate, which is what I'm trying to do with you right now. R, release, which means I should be cussing your ass out about the cell phone. U is for understanding, which means you should be understanding that I was the password to your cell phone. S is for submit. T stands for talk to that bastard.
And everyone can mute themselves while the video is playing.
Yes, give it to me, Marcus. Give it to me.
name. Say my mark. Say his name. Say my mark. Say my mark. Say his name. Sean Bell. Say his name. Sean Bell. Sean Bell. Say his name. 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 Won't you say his name? Say his name. Great. Won't you say his name? Won't you say his name? Say his name. Money Gray. Say his name. Money Gray. Say his name. Money Gray. Won't you say his name? John Carlton. Say his name. John Carlton. Say his name. John Carlton. Say his name. Carlton. Won't you say his name? Say his name. Brown. Brown. Say his name. Say his name. Say his name. Say his name. Won't you say his name? Tommy Yancey, say his name. 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 Jordan Baker, say his name. Jordan Baker, say his name. Say his name, won't you say his name? I'ma do the y'all say his name. 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 Say his name, say his name, say his name, say his name, say his name.
Oh,
So I don't think we mentioned before that the videos we're showing are just showing how like Black people have come together just to express how they feel with their art. So the first video was Kendrick singing I Just Want to Live, and the second video was them step dancing, and the third video we're about to show is a lady creating a poem about Africans and how like white people view us, and that's not how we should be viewed, or that's not what we are, what we stand for. And then after this video, we'll get right into it.
The host Bida wanted to buy a monkey, and so his assistant gave him me. And this is what I had to say. I'm African, but I'm not a monkey, a gorilla, or a chimpanzee. Yes, we're custodians of the best wildlife. We house the most unique creatures to ever exist in this life, like the African elephant, the lion whose tribe is Judah, the cheetah, and the zebra. Have you looked at an okapi or at the beauty of a mantled gereza? We do not bite. We are depictions of congeniality. You should go back to learn your A's and B's and not those stories that they tell you about us, because we are all about family trees. Roots are strong as a mukula, and we only get stronger and better. Tule kula. We're all about cultural diversity. We believe in unity. The spirit is Ubuntu. Feba Ishibuntu. We hail from the land of the sun. We are natural bred warriors. We are children of the deserts, the savannas, the plateaus, the mountains, and the valleys, the keepers of our grandparents' stories. If Wakanda is something new to you, we have lived our lives with the spirit of a Black Panther. This blood, this is the blood of Shaka. This soil, this is the soil which birthed greats like Utatama Diva, and we cannot run away from the great musicianship or the unique artistry of legends like Dube, Oliver Mtukuzi, or Paul Ngozi. Africans. So we house the best minerals, from the diamonds, the gold, the platinum, aluminium, the oils, and the gases, from the copper belt to the city of gold. Why do you think they scrambled for Africa? We are a world which exists within a world, and we do not believe in banting. We believe in wanting to eat what we want to eat, and you're not a welcome guest in our house if we don't ask you to eat. We love our shisanyama, our kapenta with saza, or tutenembalala down south, our jollof rice and the goosey soup in the west, our posho in the east, and we go all the way up north to Tesco Shari in Egypt. We are professionals of cultural, colored cuisines, as colorful as our clothes, as we cover ourselves in our dashikis, our kente, ankara, or colorful chitenges, as we do not forget to wrap ourselves in our beautiful head ties, as we carry our pride with us. After all, we are the birthplace of civilization. We're not the forces of a sunken city. You called us a dark continent. We're not a dark continent. We are not made of darkness, and our climax is not on a dark night. We are Batman. And we are not poor. Maybe we just got in bed with you too early, which led to the launch of your global poverty prevention projects, the birth of your philanthropies. You see, leaving us only with aid or AIDS. Who needs chains for the 21st century slave? Because benevolent slavery is a mind game, which makes you believe that emancipation is just an ocean of imagination you can walk in, but never get wet. And I can still hear them bidding, stop bidding. So the white man bid the highest, and his assistant offered him me when he wanted a monkey. Did you think the assistant was white? He was Black. Africa is not for sale.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Okay.
Is everybody here? Let me.
Can everybody hear us?
Oh,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We're gonna start now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Can Breed. We Can Breed is a virtual space sponsored by Prince Ruben Moffat Tabansi Charitable Foundation, also known as PRNTCF, for short, in collaboration with Better Days Ahead Fitness Center. We Can Breed is a safe healing space created to address the mental health of our young adults in today's environment, with guidance from mental health experts, and to also talk about police relations with those who know and understand it better. We welcome Ms. Jessica Marshall, who will guide our understanding on the issue before us, which is the concern for the mental health of our young adults in today's environment of COVID-19, ongoing police brutality, and Black Lives Matters protests. Ms. Jessica Marshall is a licensed mental health therapist, a youth advocate, a coach, a healer, and an entrepreneur. Her experiences include global teletherapy. She's a co-facilitator of National Fatherhood Initiative and Strive for Education. She is also the co-founder of Naturally Beautiful Hair. She has her Master's of Social Work from Columbia University and licenses from New York Office of Professionals and New Jersey Office of Professionals. Ms. Jessica, you are welcome. Also with us is Coach Tad Cromwell, our co-sponsor for this event. Mr. Cromwell is a youth counselor, a certified personal trainer, CEO and founder of Better Days Ahead Fitness Center. Indeed, better days are ahead of us, Mr. Cromwell.
Yes, yes.
You are welcome. I also would like to introduce my host, the beautiful, young, and talented Miss Fatima Sensei. She's a multi-link journalist at Inside Diaspora. Ms. Fatima, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Ms. Marshall, thank you so much for taking time from your very busy schedule.
Hi, how are you?
To be with us today. Once again, you are very, very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Please excuse my screen sometimes go off and on. I'm between my phone and my computer. I was having some technical difficulties, so I'm working. But we're set up on the phone, so it should be okay.
So, please, we would like you to tell us. We would like you to tell us how the mental health of our youth and adults are affected by the police brutality, systemic racism, and the ongoing Black Lives Matters, not to mention coming out of COVID-19.
Yes. So it feels like an avalanche of things are happening at one time, particularly to the African-American community. Just in general, most people are feeling extra anxious. There are higher rates of anxiety and depression due to being in quarantine, being affected by COVID-19. But on top of that, African-Americans and those of African descent in this country have, there's some terms that people call is persistent stress due to racism. It's constant. So it's when you are seeing images or hearing about police brutality, when you are stopped more frequently by police, when you are walking into spaces and you're reminded that you're African or you're African descent, that you're Black, those things do something psychologically to us. It keeps us in sometimes a hyper vigilant state where we're always aware of our race, where we never can be completely relaxed or feel comfortable. And it affects people differently because if you combine that with pre-existing stressors that we have just from, our everyday lives, on top of that, racism is probably one of the number one factors of mental health and physical illness in this country. So it affects people differently. Teens, because we're talking about youth, the way that teens process stress and process things that impact their emotional health is a little bit different. Their brains are, forming, not 100% fully formed. And so how their behaviors will sometimes won't look like they're related, but there are ways that there's some signs, and we'll talk about that through this, but definitely the forced isolation, the racism, the triggers that people already have from growing up in their families, all create this kind of like mix of feelings and emotions. And a lot of people are feeling like they need more support right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that to our other panelists, Dr. DeLacy Davis and Minister Vernon will be joining us around 4 p.m. So at this point, if people have questions to ask Ms. Marshall, please.
I actually wanted to see who all was on. So I'm gonna go to my other screens and just see if there are any youth on, and I'll open it to anyone, but particularly those who are younger. Kind of want to pose some questions to see if you either could raise your hand or if you can put in the chat me. I just want to kind of do a temperature gauge and see how everyone's feeling right now. So if you can raise your hand or put in the chat me, if this applies to you. I've been feeling more restless lately. If that applies to you, for me or yes. I'm going between screens. I see some hands. I've been sleeping more or less than normal. I'm always worrying or feeling like something bad is going to happen. I feel less safe. I don't feel very hopeful for my future. And there's one more question. After watching the TV or news, I feel worse. So, okay. So I want you to think of, these are just a sample handful of questions that we can start to ask ourselves. If you've answered yes or raise your hand to at least one of those questions, it's a sign that you're impacted by what's happening. And there are some, and I'll put in the chat, there are some questionnaires that parents can ask their children, that adults can ask themselves, that'll help us understand where we are in our level of function. So based on what's happening right now. And it's a good gauge to see if something is a little bit alarming and maybe you might want to go speak to someone in a professional way. Sometimes things pass. So it could be just a heightened feeling. You might have just heard about something happening and you just in this moment in time feel that way and it might die down. But I want people to ask themselves if this is something that's persistent and ongoing or if it's something that's just happening for that short period of time. I'm trying to access the chat to see. But I did see I see a lot of me's and that you agree. Yes. So I have some responses to some questions I got earlier. I don't know if you want me to just go into that or if anybody has any questions. They're ongoing since the pandemic started, right? So because the pandemic started and more people are reporting that they're more anxious and more nervous and more anxiety and depression, New York City and just the United States as a whole opened up some support. So I want to share some support for you. So if you feel like you want to, I'm cutting and pasting. The first thing I'm cutting and pasting is called crisis support. And these, I've actually texted them to test out the system. They're the most kindest, calmest people you could ever speak to. They're 24/7, it's free. You can text them if you maybe you're having a moment. You can also go to their website, crisistextline.org, or you can text 741-741. And their support, they can also help you with referrals. If you're like, I would like to talk to a therapist, I would like to find resources. I put that in the chat. I have a lot of resources. I don't have to do it all right now, but you can stop me anytime you need to. And then another one is New York City Well, for those who live in New York City. It's free confidential support. I'm putting it in the chat box. And they do referral services for people who need some help with mental health or substance use. But they're really pushing these resources now because a lot of people are really impacted from being in quarantine, from racism, from protesting, from everything happening at this time. Put one more resource. Sorry. In the chat box for you. Oh, I didn't press send. Okay. Those are just some resources. But if there are other ways that people can calm down if they, or find some kind of balance during this time that isn't always just going to a therapist. So there are, therapy comes in many forms. I've always felt like you can go seek, a lot of people go to their churches, they go to elders that they trust in the community. Sometimes you have a family member that you really trust, a responsible adult, a good friend. You can utilize that. You can also do things, journaling, exercise. Tad will talk more about physical activity and how that can help empower and strengthen us and help support us in our mental health as well as our physical health. But I want to ask people another question. What are some self-help things that you do for yourself when you feel like you just kind of, you need to balance out? What are some things you do? For me, I like to journal, and I like to do something creative. So I want to know what things are people utilizing right now in this time to get through, to help you get through. Put in the chat. I've heard some other people tell me, we have a group on Facebook, and some people share that they have plants, that they watch a particular show or they listen to music. I am seeing
For me,
sound bowl, play music, breath work, meditation. Awesome. I like what Jamie said, unplug from social media. And then you said prayer. Awesome. So I don't feel like I am telling people what to do, but I feel like social media is a blessing and a curse. I feel like we can connect with people and you link up with friends, but also the timeline, the scrolling of constant news and images. You definitely have to protect your mind. You have to protect your mental health. You have to be vigilant about that. Just like we have to be about our health, we have to be about anything. We have to be the same way about mental health. We cannot just allow images and all types of things into our mental space. So that might mean unplugging from social media, or maybe only getting on social media during a certain time, and the rest of the time you go spend it, in the real world. Driving helps, definitely. But the news also. So I just like to put that out there. The news has been known to make people feel depressed after watching it. And even though the news tries to sometimes put good news in, they try to do one or two stories, for the most part, the news is very depressing. So it's reported that people actually, after watching a news broadcast, can actually feel worse. And so when we have things that are really scary and new, like having a virus and then having worldwide protesting, and then who knows what else, to have that on constantly going into your home should be your safe space. You should have some safe space somewhere. If it's your home, your room, the park, someplace where you can go and feel like you can relax a little bit. And if you don't have that, and you're inviting all these things to kind of disrupt your peace, you're not going to really have a chance to kind of get back to balance. So it's really important that you maintain some boundaries with media and social media. But is there any, like long walks, journaling, no news, self-development podcasts, awesome. And TV shows. Yeah, I say everything doesn't always, there's some random silly shows, and it's kind of a therapy for me to watch maybe old reruns of a show, because it gets me in a space where I feel calm and relaxed, and that might be what people could use to help get back down, to a sense of peace. Feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. So for me, unfortunately, I have to be on social media for my job.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so I found myself because I work with a media company, and you know, that's 5 days out of the week, and I found myself posting less on my personal page because everything that I saw on my timeline was so traumatizing, and I'm a emotional person. So it, like, that's why I was really excited to be part of this, because I myself need this, honestly, because I think I've been traumatized. So
Yeah. When we talk about trauma, that word is interesting because sometimes people hear trauma and they think it has to be something serious, like it has to be a horrible incident that you experienced. But trauma is how you perceive what happened to you, and if it causes your body to respond in a stressful way, and for significantly, then that can be a traumatic experience. So watching things on TV, especially when they play like the murder, when a cop is murdered and they keep replaying it and replaying it, that is a form of trauma. You didn't happen to you, but you're watching it happen to someone. You've attached feelings and emotions to it, and they keep playing it over. You don't have a way to go process it, to go, well, you may talk to other people about it, but it's just lingering around. It's not really, it's just stuck inside of you. And then you might start acting differently when you see a police officer, or so that trauma, there's different types of trauma, and there's persistent trauma, there's stress, there's all different levels to it. But if it affects you and it's disrupting your everyday processes, like it's constantly kind of bothering you, or you can't sleep, or then it's significant enough to need to get some support to address it. And I always tell people, if something traumatizes you, I can't say that it wasn't, oh, it's nothing, or downplay it. It can be very, and the way it can be very traumatizing regardless. And the way you express how you deal with that will vary from person to person. But so what I think what we can do is focus on what we can control. What we can control is how we cope with it, what we do to try to restore balance with ourselves, what we do to get the help that we need. Those are things that we have a little bit more control over. So we could pour a lot of our time and energy into doing those things which will restore us. So, yeah. Let me know if you have any other questions or anything, because I have more to say, but I don't want to just talk over.
No, I have something to say. For me, like how it kind of affected me as well is that, like, because I went to
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, you're fine. They were white, kind of, and like I made friends with them and all of that, but it's hard to see, like, because now you have them on social media, and like to see like they're like Blue Lives Matter, all of that. It's kind of like hurtful, because like this is somebody I went to school with. We used to play around. I was at your house, you were at my house, and just to like, and I understand, like, it's like kind of like
Straight ahead, and then in 4/10 of a mile, left turn.
I'm gonna mute everyone.
Okay.
Okay. It's like a battle, because I somewhat understand, like, if they have family members who are cops and whatnot, but at the same time, it's like, how could you? It's just, people are fighting for their lives right now, And I understand not all cops are bad, but it's just I understand all cops are not bad, but for you not to say a word, for you just to just be fighting for police lives and all of that, when Black people are being killed by the police like constantly, it's just disturbing, because like we literally used to share food, we used to, it's just so just like very somehow now, like you're around other people now, it's also a little, like, I also have to remember not all white people are like this, but then again, I have to keep my distance.
Yeah. First and foremost, you have to do what you need to do for your mental health and for your sanity. But I think a lot of the things that are disappointing about now is that people are seeing people who they consider friends and work or coworkers or even family express views that bother you, and that could bother you, or surprise you, maybe even sadden you or anger you. Excuse me. So I always say that under, well, I don't, you said this is a classmate you used to go to school with, or is this a friend, a good friend?
Well, she was a good friend. We're not friends anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's not to sound callous or mean, but sometimes things come to light, and it wouldn't be to your benefit to continue that friendship if it was stressing you like that, if you were always going to wonder and question and so sometimes, unfortunately, I hear that they're talking. Life has friendships that situations happen and friendships end or pause. But this time, I think that's one of the difficult times right now too, is that because it's bringing up these topics of race and people are starting to speak out, it's causing conflict. And people who were once friends, even people who are married, who are interracial, and then, oh, I didn't know my husband thought that, and so a lot of our relationships are being tested, and we're losing friendships over that. I always go back to us though, and making sure that we're strong, and that we're supported, because there's a lot of layers to what's happening, because we're of African descent, and we're in this country, and we already have unique experiences that it's hard for other people to understand. And then when things like this happen, and people who who haven't had our experience,
Proceed about 3/10 of a mile.
sorry.
Sorry. You have to unmute. You have to unmute her.
Where is she?
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. What I was saying about friendships, but so also understand, not that you need to, you're first and foremost, but other people who are white or other races also are going through maybe extreme feelings of guilt. They're being extra, everyone's kind of going through something, and it's not your job to worry about fixing them or anything, but just understand that that's kind of a normal response to people who have been told certain story all their lives, and then things happen and people are starting to protest, and stand up for other groups of people. Those people, that throws their world off. And so now then he's saying blue lives matter and going extra, and now it's like striking nerves with you and pushing sensitive buttons. Yeah, you're gonna probably need to distance and just understand that you got to make sure you put boundaries for your mental health and yourself first. I hope I answered your question. And I don't know if I didn't. It's not going to be.
Yeah, it wasn't really even a question. It was more
Okay, it's a feeling.
Yeah, feeling. Just like, you're going to be in school with these people, work with them. It's just like, how can you like deal with it or cope with it?
Yeah.
Distance yourself, really. That's it.
Yeah. And are you in college?
Yeah, I'm in college.
So it's really great to kind of unify with like-minded groups. I know colleges are great for peer student groups that connect on common interests. The Black groups, when I was in college, I was in a lot of the Black Caucus, Black social workers, but we all kind of found safe spaces for us where we can talk about these. And I think it's really important to be around other students who may be experiencing some similar things as you, and getting in a space where you can talk to them and find out how they're getting through it. And just surround yourself with a lot of support right now, a lot of support. And I know you're probably not physically in school, but I think virtually, just get into some support groups. Yeah. I'm looking at you on my computer, so that's why I'm looking away. Sorry.
During this period of Black Lives Matters and seeing all the videos on the internet, I had like an awakening and kind of like an understanding about the trauma of racism, the brutality, what Black Americans had to deal with for over 400 years without any help, on their mental health.
Yeah.
And that is what inspired me to want to do this.
Yeah.
Because I see the trauma and it just keeps happening, And one wonders why Black people are aggressive or act out. And I kind of feel it's because they've not really addressed the effect of these things on them.
Yeah.
How it has impacted their life and how, because I used to be judgmental, but with my self-awareness and understanding, because I came from Africa, from Nigeria, and we have ethnicity problem, but it wasn't because of the color of my skin, which is kind of the same thing, but in a way not, because this one is the color of your skin. And I kind of start understanding why some Blacks are very aggressive and why they react to the police at times the way they do, and why they sound angry all the time or thinking like somebody wants to get over, because they've not really been helped to understand what is going on, their mental state and their emotions. So I kind of felt the need to bring for our youth to talk about this. Otherwise, they end up harboring. The tension builds up that they might one day explode and do something. Could you help us to, to understand?
Yeah. So what happens when people, I feel like a lot of, probably the majority of African Americans, everyone really, but African Americans have been through depression or have periods of depression, have experienced it, or are currently at some level of it. It doesn't mean that we're not functioning. You can't function. You can function very well, but have this like in the back of your mind, these feelings bubbling up and no way to really express them. So here's some signs, because I was just thinking of depression just real quick when you were saying that, and unaddressed depression looks like, so there's some emotional changes. That's where the feelings of frustration, anger, even over little things, feelings of sadness, which that's what most people think depression is just, but depression also can be anger. I always feel like the opposite. Depression is anger turned inwards. And, anger looks like outwards. Feeling hopeless, irritable, annoyed. Sometimes people have this stereotype of angry Black man or angry Black woman. So the depression, I believe, is a symptom of a bigger problem, which can be traumatic events that have happened in people's lives, from their households to the community to the the world. Those events have impacted them, and it turned into depression. And the depression has symptoms that look like what we were just talking about. You were saying, feeling like, so we've been through trauma in this country. There's never been any mass effort to do therapy for African Americans or African descendant people in this country who've been impacted by slavery. There's been nothing that was like consistent. I think other groups that have been through trauma in this country. Uh-oh, I hear echo.
No, you're good.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can hear you.
Oh, wow, loud. Okay.
Hear you twice.
Yeah. Okay, it sounds like it's gone away. Do you hear me echo again?
No, you're
we
good.
didn't
Okay.
hear you before, but
Oh, I heard a really loud echo, so I had to stop for a second. Okay, so because we didn't, we've had to find coping, right? So when people look and they just from the outside looking in, they're like, why are African Americans, so many of them on drugs and poor, and people tend to not understand what unaddressed. I mean, it's more the mental health. There's financial things. There's other things that have happened that we've had as challenges. But mental health is the biggest one, because that's what's going to determine whether you even have the strength to try to get out of the situation and strive for better. But low self-esteem, feelings of worthlessness, extreme sensitivity to rejection, criticism, all these different things, and people are trying to operate, and there hasn't been any real formal way to address it. So I even said, what should happen is that everyone should get, there should be some mass movement of mental health initiative for Black people to access free mental health by other African descended people. That's what I've always felt, but we'll see. But we can at least start with working on our the things that we're challenged with personally. So going to a therapist to try to deal with our own unique feelings of what's happened in our lives. You start there, really, and then we can start to create better families, better relationships, have better interactions with people. That's why I always said we are like the gatekeepers to our mind. We have to be the ones standing outside the gate and saying, I'm not going to let this, I'm guarding my mental health. I'm safeguarding it. And I need to know when I need to get help to do that. And a lot of us needed help. A lot of us continue to need help. There's generations that have needed help. But I think that we're strong. We've always been strong. We've always been resilient and quite powerful. So I always feel like the fact that we're able to accomplish such great things, despite having generations that had to deal with the trauma, speaks volumes. So I always feel like that's hope and going forward. Please excuse me because I'm in a public space. So I want to make sure if sometimes I look away. Well, did you have a question with your statement, Jane?
No, the question is,
okay.
I wanted you to shed light on how, on how that has impacted the lives of Black Americans, so that some of us who were not born of, who did not have a slave descendant can kind of understand and be more sympathetic and, understanding, and to make sure, to ensure our children are Americans themselves, to make sure that they don't have to go through, to be able to deal with these feelings that might come up because they are Americans. They are first generation Americans, and they are going to encounter the same thing.
Yeah. I referenced this professor that I really admired at Columbia School of Social Work that does research into how racism has impacted the health and mental health of anyone of African descent. And she'd done a research study that was really telling. It was about families. So, African Americans have been here for generations, like my family. And then there are those who come and then within one generation, start to develop some of the same kind of challenges that African Americans who've been here for generations have. Some of the health challenges, some of the mental health challenges. And she was basically concluding that once you get into this country and you start to operate and move within this country system, if you don't hold on very strongly to your cultural value, even if you try to, there's still some way that you have to assimilate. And that was where we were being impacted by the effects of racism that this country has always had. For instance, access to medical care. Even if you're wealthy and you're African descent, you're still, once you get here, racism has its roots still entrenched. You still appear to, you look Black as Black to people who want to be racist, or if you encounter that, you go someplace, you might not be able to get a loan as easy just because you look like, the same as African Americans here. So she's found in her study that that was an issue, that was a problem. As soon as families came here, within one generation, they started to develop some of the same symptoms, and she blamed it on all the ways that racism has been a part of the system. But what I felt was gonna be an antidote to that was gonna help correct it, was to try to pull on and maintain as much culture and value as possible that was unifying and supportive that you had when, in your home country, and try to hold on to ways to, so for instance, there's a mental health crisis here for all Americans, but especially for African Americans. For African Americans, we have a history of having a lot of our cultural ways kind of, when we got to this country, we had everything taken from us, and we just kind of got thrown into, the culture that was in America was creating. So for those who try to create strong foundations of helping to support other family members, helping to identify emotional needs, those are the ones that do better because we're trying to put back some sense of structure. But unfortunately, there are some families that are impacted. Like, our family systems sometimes are dysfunctional or broken, or people need help and they don't get it. And we kind of keep the patterns going. So I just thought that was interesting, though, to hear. It made me think, as soon as you touch your foot on American soil, you kind of get caught up in the challenges, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I always felt like having a strong sense of culture. Also in mental health, that was proven to be very helpful when I did the fatherhood groups. We had a curriculum that was pulled off of African principles. We had each week with a particular principle. We used that as the theme for the group, and we did libations. We pulled off a lot of cultural things, and that was really powerful. It did something that I hadn't seen any other kind of social work group I've done before. I haven't seen it impact the participants as much as I've seen us pulling on these foundations of our culture. It was really powerful. So I think that was something that just showed me that we need to connect back to strength that we've had thousands of years creating in our original cultures, and what was keeping our families together was keeping us well, support systems, elders, like and I'm not saying, I don't like to say elder, old people who are older like us who want to help youth, such as yourself, creating spaces for us to start healing and being a support. That's powerful. And just giving thanks and honor, it was something that was beneficial. If I answered your question. Did I answer?
Yes.
Okay. Is the link for children, someone's asking. Oh, sorry, that's private. I'm sending links that are good for youth and adults in the chat. I put a link for finding a therapist. And then I like that link for finding a therapist because you can find Black psychologists, you can find, people who specialize with our group or other groups of people, not just therapists for everyone. And then there's, there is therapists for everyone. There's also, I'm going to put another link for, where is it? I had a link for, I think that was the link. Oh, I didn't put the screening. I'm going to put that link. So there's going to be a main screening site to screen, like, for instance, you want to know if your symptoms or things that you're feeling is something you should be concerned about. There's one for adults and there's one for youth. You can screen. I've done a screening for my child and I've done a screening for myself. You could put your age in, and I'm going to put that in the chat. And it's just important. It's not like a diagnostic tool that's going to diagnose you and it's a final, but it's good to know you have some symptoms of X, Y, and Z. You may want to go speak to someone about that, because once we got here in this country, we started developing, mental health needs and concerns because of the society that we're in. We're in a society that places value on certain things, that has people work a certain way. There's certain challenges, and so it creates dysfunctions that may not exist if we were not in this kind of society. So I put that in there. So
You have more questions for?
I did want to say, I do want to say this about, I'm looking in chat. So I just wanted to real quick go into some emotional changes that we just discussed when we were talking about things that you should be on alert for. The feelings of sadness, frustration, being easily triggered, irritable, low self-esteem, feeling worthless or guilt, fixations on past failures, maybe overly critical, trouble thinking, concentrating, making decisions. Are you forgetful? And then sometimes frequent thoughts of death, dying, or suicide. You're going to watch for your behaviors, like if you're sleeping too much or sleeping too little, if you have no energy, your changes in appetite, you may not be eating at all, or increased eating, which then they said that either you're losing a lot of weight or you're gaining a lot of weight quickly. Use of alcohol or drugs, that's the obvious one. Social isolation. Social isolation. If you are isolating yourself, self-harm, obviously, less attention to our appearance. But sometimes these things are not alarming. Some of them are right off the bat, but sometimes what's really the problem is if these things are happening for at least a couple of weeks, but then you're going into like months and they're just consistently that you haven't seen a change, then you should start thinking of seeing a doctor. So if you're a parent and you see this in your child, you can take them to the primary care doctor. Even, you don't have to have a therapist set in place to get help. You can just make it a doctor's appointment. If you're an adult, you can go to your doctor and just say, I have these things. But also, if that's not something that you want to do, find whatever support you feel comfortable with at some type of professional and effective level, and go look at that and say, I need a little bit of help. I think a lot of people have mixed feelings about going to therapists, and that's fine. But I think what we need to we really should focus on is getting mental health support. That's effective, that's positive, that's healing. Obviously, emergency room. If you know a youth that's expressing suicide, emergency room. I know it's hard when we have a pandemic happening, and emergency rooms and hospitals are an issue. So you can ultimately, if they're like, I'm doing it, or you're really, really concerned, that's just still the best option. But you also have those links I put in the chat, the crisis line. If you're still kind of not sure, or you want to flesh the thoughts out, they're available 24/7. They're extremely helpful. So I would definitely tell you to keep those numbers. And if you're in New York City, well, then also there's websites you can go online and you can chat through online, but make sure that you keep an eye out on yourself and your loved ones. Just try to notice if there's anything happening. I think, and also there's no stigma. I've felt, and I'm very transparent, and a lot of therapists and people of all different levels have gone through and overcome mental health challenges, but they've gone through things. We've all gone through things. Things happen in our lives. We're human, and our brains are not equipped. Our brains, I'll say this, not that they're not equipped. Our brains try to process things, but sometimes processing really heavy, really disturbing things, it does other things to help us cope. So we have to understand how to support ourselves, how to identify when, something's not right. I do want to get through this with some support, and it's okay. Totally okay. I can kind of see. I start looking at just people's affect, if they're looking like they're a little more down. I can look at people's appearance. So there's certain things that I kind of can see based on my experience. But if we can be more caring and more supporting and loving of each other, we can all get through challenges, any challenge, together. It's much better for us to unify and support each other to help us as a collective get through than to all of us try to do it on our own or feel like we are not comfortable getting the help. We're much more powerful if we work together.
Jessica, thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me use this opportunity to welcome Dr. Dee Delassie Davis and Minister Vernon You're both welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Delancey is a retired police sergeant, a member of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice and Accountability. Dr. is also a motivational speaker on African Americans and diversity. He runs different programs for parents, teachers, administrators, and concerned citizens. Some of his programs include, but not limited to, police brutality and strategy to stop the violence, community police relationship, role of police in the community, gangs, everything you need to know. He stresses the importance of elevating men in the community and education strategies. Dr. Delancey, his educational qualification include Masters of Doctorate of Education, Masters of Public Health. He's also an author on 2 books, A Crisis of Action, that is Educational Crisis Plan, and A Day with Daddy and Me. Forgive me if I made any errors, okay? You are very welcome. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you,
Please
sir.
welcome. And Minister Wells. Minister Wells is also a police officer and a founder of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement UK. You are welcome, sir. They will help us deal with police relationship and tell us how our young adults, how to handle even ourselves when we find ourselves in sticky situation with some aggression to it. Thank you. You are both most welcome. We're glad to have you here with us.
Well, we thank you. We're glad to be here. I'm here to be very supportive. Dr. DeLacy has done some wonderful things, and all I can do is just continue to follow in his footsteps. And we have connected with the National Coalition of Law Enforcement. We have done several things that we have done together, and looking at the title, I Can Breathe. That's a wonderful thing. One of the things I wanted to come forth with some words of wisdom is called like the Sibai. I'm coming from the African's perspective. So as a Pan-African perspective, there's a book that's called the Hosea, which is selections from the Hosea by other than Dr. Malana Karanga. And I looked at some of the words that had to deal with breath. And here I went into the fact of dealing from the book of knowing the creation. He said in this book, going back to our ancestors, it said, I created the 4 winds so that every person might breathe in his or her time and place. This is one of the deeds, okay? All right. Here's a word that I really wanted to share. And the word was coming from the book of Kunanut. All right, this here it refers going back to ancient Egypt. So this might be new to everyone, but just listen to the words. Punish the robber and save those who suffer. Do not be a flood against the petitioner. Be aware of the approach of eternity. Desire to live long, for as it is said, doing right is breath for the nose. Punish those who deserve punishment, and none will equal your righteousness. Answer not good with evil, and put not one thing in the place of another. The balancing of the land lies in Ma'at. Truth, justice, righteousness, balance, harmony, peace, right, order, and reciprocity. We come from the perspective in the African village of dealing with the deity, some might call the goddess Ma'at. And those are the principles that we want to always stand on and that we strive for, because sometimes there's not a moral concept of what to strive for when it is time to come forth. So as Sister Jane said, I was able to serve 20 years on the police force in New York City as a police sergeant, and I'm as far as coming forth and being able to matriculate into an African centered minister because of dealing with our history and who we were before this oppressed nation that we live in and grew up in came about. So I'm here to support Dr. DeLacy and to share also.
Thank you, brother. And I'll just share from an introductory point of view. I'm honored to be here. I'm a retired sergeant from East Orange, New Jersey. I founded Black Cops Against Police Brutality in 1991 while on the police force. And so there were 2 Black police officers in this country in the 90s starting out that were talking about police violence, misconduct, and terrorism. And the first was the group that our brother minister was with, and that's Eric Adams. At that time, Council of Guardians, he was a sergeant, and I heard him on the radio. If he could stand up and do it in New York, then why wasn't I doing it in New Jersey as a patrolman? And so I'd only been on the job 5 years and found the courage to stand up, and then founded the organization. And we wanted to simply be the conscience of the criminal justice system to enhance the quality of life for African people and to improve community police relationships. And that's been our mission. We started it 29 years ago now. And I'll say, there've been folks who have called in, and Brother Vernon has called and they said, well, Brother DeLacy, why aren't you on the front line of these protests? And what I said that 25 years ago, I said, if I'm doing the same thing 25 years later that I was doing 25 years ago, wasted your time, my time, and you should take me out, because that's a waste of time. We should make way for them, and we should create that condition as elders in the village to support them, but not be in the front of the lead. So I am extremely proud of the young people that are in the streets today, putting pressure on the government, local governments, and federal government. I want to say, in opening, I now run a family support organization, and I left the police department. I was a school principal for 5 years in Newark, New Jersey. While on the police force, I adopted 4 children. I have 1 birth child, but I met children along the way who needed support. And my mother, until her passing in 2012, helped me raise them. And so I took in 3 young ladies and 1 young man. And the youngest was 12 at the time. The oldest was 16. My youngest adopted child is now 33, and the oldest is 37. And so that's just been our life's work. And so now I'm the executive director for the Family Support Organization in Union County, New Jersey, and we provide support services to parents of children with special needs, as well as juvenile justice system involved young people and children with substance use challenges. So that's kind of where I am and still doing this work. And my most recent, my dissertation, which published January 2020, was Police Use of Force, examining the factors relating to police officers shooting unarmed Black males. So recently I was doing a forum with Dr. John Lyons, who does a lot of work around mental health and around supporting families. And he opened up talking about Black Lives Matter. And this is a white man, 34 years in the mental health field. And I thought his quote was interesting. He says, "You only get racial justice by identifying the causes of racial injustice. There are many racial injustices in this country, so you must search for the root cause of each racial injustice to get justice." So that's where we are, and that's where I'll stop in the introduction, but I'm honored to be here, and thank you everyone for having me.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for taking your time from your very busy schedule to be with us. We are honored. Dr. DeLacy, could you help us, or rather help our youth to understand how, when confronted with police brutality, with police and aggressive police, how to de-escalate? Because at the end of the day, we want them home. We want them safe at home. That's the most important thing. We don't want to be fighting for our dead child. We want them to be home safe. Please, can you help us shed light on what it is they can do to prevent, if possible?
Sure. So let me say this, and I need to say it in all honesty and full transparency. So we wrote the curriculum on what to do when stopped by the police in the early 90s. And it was expanded upon by 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. And they wrote an additional copyright, which we didn't challenge because they were our brothers and sisters. So we didn't challenge them for copyright infringement. So there are two copyrights out there. And we are brothers and sisters. When we did that kind of work, I believe then that we had the opportunity to be in control of our destiny and to kind of try to provide some resources for when you stop by the police on a street corner, when they come knocking at your door, and when you're in a motor vehicle stop. I want to say very clearly that some of what we may suggest can be helpful. I am not as hopeful about it as I was when we started. And the reason for that is because I believe that we're living in a time where the die-hard, cold-blooded racists see that melanated people are taking over the world just by our very existence. And out of fear, they're well out of the norm, but within the pathology of what we know historically them to be and what they're acting out now. So I want to say that because I don't want this to be perceived as a begin-all, end-all. But what we do teach our young people is first, when you're being confronted by the police, you have got to make a split-second decision whether you got the real police or the real boys in the hood who are in uniforms with guns and badges, and they will kill you. That's the first decision you have to make. Then you must distinguish the difference between a battle and a war. A war is when you risk it all and you may lose it all up to and including your life. The battle is the fight that you can afford to walk away from, run from, hide from, and live to fight another day. And that's a distinction that we have to help them make, because just today, I spent 2 hours this afternoon talking to a sister who was stopped with her boyfriend, who she admitted is gang active, driving her car, and a rogue Caucasian lieutenant stopped them and cursed them repeatedly, threatened to lock her up, eventually locked him up, but then moved to have her lose her job working for the city where she was, because they work in the same city. And her mother reached out to me. And so we're doing all the things legally to help insulate, but even when you're doing it right, misbehaving police officers are going to still misbehave. And so what I told her when she talked to me, I said, I've known your mother 30 years, so I'm going to talk to you as though you're my daughter because you're the same age as my daughter. I don't need you as a strong Black woman to go back and forth with a rogue police officer in the street. Because it's a split second, 2.5 seconds to squeeze the trigger of a gun with 4 pounds of pressure if it's cocked, and 8 pounds, a little more than 8 pounds when it's single action. And my point to her was, you went back and forth and you weren't wrong, but you picked the wrong place to have that battle. Because now we're spending thousands of dollars for legal representation, and we're coordinating the community to support you. And you're not wrong, but the problem is we got to make a more sophisticated decision out on the street when we're by ourselves. Because I agree with you, as I tell my 5 children, I want you to come home at the end of an encounter with the police. I don't want you to have to know all of your rights and all of the Constitution on that street corner, because it may end in your death. And that's the concern. And that is, I heard the Sister Jessica speaking earlier when I came on, that is some of the trauma that our community is faced with. That is some of the pain and suffering, the psychological scarring that goes on in our village. And we've got these generational traumas that are going on, whether it's primary, secondary, or tertiary trauma, because it's either something that's been done to us, something that we've seen done to someone else, or something that we heard about. And either way, it causes damage to any civilized human being with a heart.
Thank you very much. Please, I don't want to hog questions. Please, everybody that has a question, feel free to ask questions.
So what is your, well, not yours, but so defunding the police, right? What's your stance on that? Like, I probably already know it, but like, just let's hear what your thoughts.
I think that's a great question. So defunding the police, my stance is predicated on what we define as defunding. So if we're defining defunding, let me step back one. I don't know where defunding came from as a phrase. It's absolutely very catchy and it's making people think and reimagine policing. But if we're talking about defunding the police in the sense of let's take the entire budget and have police no more, I live in a community where Pookie, Peaches, and Ray Ray and them hope the police don't exist anymore, right? Because I choose to live in the inner city, in the hood, where living is good if you can survive. I've been here all my life, but I recognize that we need some kind of public safety. I support the idea of defunding the police in the context of divesting from their budget and reallocating the resources to social services, whether it's homelessness, whether it's addiction, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's all of those other kinds of things that we need in our community to make our community whole and safe and try to repair the damage that has been done over a period of time. However, and I know people have been calling and saying, because I'm in New Jersey, well, Camden, they defunded the police. No, they didn't defund the police. They deconstructed the Camden Police Department as it was constituted and then reconstituted a police department that was no longer in the city, but countywide. They terminated all of the 300 officers who worked for the Camden Police Department, made them all reapply for their jobs, and 1/3 of them were rehired. Well, it's not really a defunding, it's a deconstruction and restructure. So, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing used to say that there's 9 people area activities that are dominated by white supremacy, and we have to either get into these institutions and destroy them, tear them down, rebuild them, reform them, but we have to engage. And so one of them is law. And so that is an area where our community should be fully engaged. And finally, I believe that every community has a right to decide how it should be policed. We should be demilitarizing our community. They should end the federal 1033 program that allows them to bring military surplus gear into urban communities. We don't need to be over-policed, and we also need police who are aligned with the values and the virtues of the community that's paying their salary. So that's how I see that. I also believe firmly that our community can secure itself. We've not done that in a very meaningful way, generally speaking, but I've been to the continent. I've been to Ghana, West Africa. I've been to many trips there with young people. I've been to South Africa, but in Ghana, I have been in 100% crime-free villages. And people may have been living, some of the folks that I've come to know were living in abject poverty as we understand it economically, but they were crime-free. So it wasn't necessarily the link between wealth, poverty, and crime. Right? It's also about values. It's also about a belief system. It is like Brother Vernon just said, we're brothers. And because we're brothers, he can pick up the phone and say, hey, brother, I need you, and vice versa. And so defunding the police makes sense to me if you've got a police department that is outright rogue and serving no good for the community. That community should decide if that's something that they want. But I also believe collectively and as a community, we have to begin to reimagine policing from a public safety perspective, from a do no harm perspective, and from a constitutional policing perspective. Because the children that I adopted, I met as a police officer. I didn't go to an adoption agency and say, give me a child. I was in the police department meeting young people who had a need. And because I was commanding a unit around community policing, one of our responsibilities and charges is to help the community solve problems. And not just the community that we like, but also the community that does not like us. And so I didn't plan to adopt 4 children. It just kept happening. And my mother kept saying, I'll help you. And so they kept coming home with me. And they're now 33 to 37 and all working well. All have at least graduated high school, gone to college, and doing well and thriving. And so that is the true essence of how we do community policing, but we recognize that not all police officers feel that way. In fact, what I'll say to some folk is, how do you de-escalate a racist? How do you untrain a racist? And what I do, especially when we're talking about shooting Black people, because Black women are also being killed, Breonna Taylor, say her name, right? And so Black women are also being killed by the police, and we have to decide, how do we handle this? One of my largest criticisms in law enforcement is of Black police officers. because I recognize that my white counterparts would never, ever think about doing what they've done in our community if Black men in law enforcement had the testicular fortitude to stand up and call them what they are, cowards. Because they would never let us go into their communities and shoot Joey, Timmy, Susie, Betsy, or Mary because we thought she had a candy bar in her hand, because she had a pair of keys, because I thought she was reaching for a weapon. In fact, when the brother Noor did it in Minneapolis and he shot that white woman, not only did they prosecute him quickly, they gave him 12 years and gave her family $20 million with the swiftness.
Wow. I have a question, Jane. How you doing, Dr. DeLacy?
I'm good,
Minister Wells. Dr. DeLacy, you hit on some important things, and it took me to the question that I wanted to ask. As you said, you can't change the races. In terms of you and Minister Wells organizing Black officers to be the protectors of the community and the vanguard, has there been challenges on recruiting Black officers to take up the charge? And if so, what have the challenges been?
Well, I'll speak from my side of the water and then I'll defer to my brother. So I'm going to be very honest with you. I have no desire to spend another moment of my time talking to Negroes in law enforcement. None at all. I've been a member of the National Black Police Association since 1986. I became a life member of the National Black Police Association in 1996. In 1996 to 2000, I was a regional representative for the National Black Police Association, Northeast region, representing 8 states, including New Jersey and New York. Ozzie Thompson, who was NYPD, I took over from him. And I love Brother Ozzie. He used to do security at the Apollo. But Brother Ozzie, and may God be pleased with him, when I got ready to run, I was in my 20s. And Brother Ozzie would not relinquish the reins. And so me and Brother Minister Vernon, we were the young bucks on the scene, okay? And what I said to him is, out of respect for you, since you won't relinquish the reins, I'm coming to tell you that I'm coming to take it from you. When I took over the Northeast region, they had 33 chapters in this Northeast, which meant members everywhere, including New York. They had $1,500 in the bank. And I said, that is a disgrace for grown people who claim to be police officers and professionals. And so I did some things to reorganize it. When I finished my term, I did a 2-year term and then ran unopposed the second 2-year term. And when we finished that term, we grew it from 33 chapters to 43 chapters. We left them with $15,000 in the bank, $30,000 in the bank, and a $15,000 legal defense offense fund, and a $5,000 rollover CD. Now, I'm saying that to you because I was fully committed to us doing the very thing you're talking about. But I can tell you now, 15, 20 years later, they're back down to about $1,500. So one of the mistakes that I believe we make is we want to party, we want to dance, we want to buck dance, we want to scratch when it don't itch, we want to laugh when it's not funny, we want to bend over when we should stand up. And I'm going to take a gamble here because I know I got a lot of sisters here, but some of our sisters tolerate that kind of guy and call it a man. And I'm telling you, it's not a man, it's a piece of a man. It might even be a mouse. Because at the end of the day, the women that I grew up with were strong Black women. And I've always said this, my grandmother was born in 1901, died in 1982, the youngest of 10 children, and all her aunts and uncles were slaves. And I say the strongest Black man I've ever known has always been a Black woman. Because Black women will go to the wall, they will go to the mat, they will ride or die for a dog, a half a dog, a piece of a man, and they will still ride for that brother. And many of us won't stand up one time for that sister who stands up for us all the time.
And I feel like that's why, like,
Salute, Dr. DeLacy. Salute.
So true.
Oh, you know, my brother's a tough act to follow.
I was going to tell you, bro.
You know,
I don't know if you should speak, Minister.
I know it gets to the point. I'm gonna have to jump in front of him before he goes, right? One of the things I'm gonna say over here in New York City, we look at what started 100 Blacks in law enforcement. We got started back in 1997. There was an incident with Abner Luima, where Justin Volpe, police officer Justin Volpe, a white police officer, took a nightstick and rammed it up his rectum. And so we were outraged. And at the time, before there was 100 Blacks in law enforcement, we were part of the Guardians Association. And it got to the point that a group of us got together and said, you know, we're not the enemies, and we need to stop fighting one another. And so we got together and we talked about we need to break off from them and form our own. And we said to God, we need another organization, another Black organization, but it was necessary. And to tell the truth, as we grew, one of the things as Dr. DeLacy was saying was that he dealt with Ozzie Thompson, and what I call those people are gatekeepers. They're the ones that are making sure that certain things that Black folks do stay within that gate and don't get out of this gate, because we built this to the fact that we are behaving in such a way, and we want to make sure that we don't make the oppressor upset. So one of the things that we came forth out and said that, listen, we're going to go straight at them and bring forth what is necessary for our people and our community. We spoke out, and unfortunately, there was things with the Guardians Association that was saying, you know, because we were getting the light and growing, they were saying that, oh, this organization, all they want to do is be out in front of a camera and making sure that everybody sees them and everything else. But one of the things that Eric Adams used to say was that if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? And the answer was, of course it makes a sound, but if nobody's there to hear it, then how do we know it fell in the forest? So our thing was to let folks know, you know, who we are and what we're doing. And so we were able to bring forth a lot of people, a lot of black and brown people that came to our organization, male and female, and they were able to join. But, you know, as the years went on, we used to say, it seemed like we broke the mold at the time that we came in on the job. So I came on the job in 1986. Maybe some of you young ladies weren't even born then or what have you, but I came on in 1986. And as time went on, we got more and more people coming on. But the thing was, the destination was to destroy that organization and do whatever it can. So, you know, as you remember, during the 60s, you had Malcolm and you had Martin Luther King. They both were fighting for our struggle. There was not so what happens is that the oppressor is bringing forth the division. So it says, well, we don't want you to go with Malcolm. We want you to focus on Martin Luther King. And so that's what they did with us. Our organization, I always used to remember, was that if you mentioned 100 Blacks in law enforcement, white folks would panic, you know. But so that in a sense, they're saying, listen, we got to do something about them. And so we need to stop this organization from growing. So they tried to make the Guardians more attractive to join, and then in turn, making sure that we were less attractive because we were making headways. We were going straight into the fact of dealing with the commissioner and also dealing with the mayor. And you know, here in New York, we had one of the racist mayors going, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani at the time. So, but you know, I always say that when you become a superhero, so-called superhero, you got to have a nemesis, right? So Giuliani was our nemesis. So, and he was the one that helped us grow because of him. Just like, you know, right now, we all got 45, you know, that's in office. And it's about what I read in the sense about doing what's right and being righteous. And that's how we stood. And that's why I read the principle of my truth, justice, righteousness, balance, harmony, peace, right order, and reciprocity. And so that's the way we have to look at the sense of what you're standing on. You're standing on doing what is right. You know, you can't be out there seeing something wrong and not doing anything. I think, let me give a story since Dr. DeLacy got me doing, he's been doing stories. I'll give a little, my story can't compare to you, DeLacy, okay? But one of the things that we always spoke about is that when you take a career, don't just start on a low level. Don't just, like, one of the things is that a lot of people, they become a police officer, and great, you might be the first one in your family to become a police officer, but you got to go further up. You know, you got to go further up the rank, whether you become a sergeant, a lieutenant, or a captain and above. So one of the things we concentrated on it, getting a lot of people to become sergeants because number one, and let's keep in mind, don't get caught up with the detective thing because the detective does not supervise anyone. They're a glorified position. They do get a certain salary, but as far as making decisions, they're not responsible for the day-to-day action that happens out on patrol. So one day I was on patrol, and I had a white officer that was in my unit. And so what happened was we got a call that there was a couple of kids that were throwing rocks at cars. And so I had called this person. He happened to be part of my unit, and he went over there, and they caught the kids. So they brought the kids in. Not the fact that we were going to lock them up. We have what we call a juvenile delinquency report or youth referral. So I just bring them to the fact that this is where we'll bring them in and we'll call their parents and let them know what they're doing. So when they went into the precinct, the next thing I did was I made sure that I came in. And so when they got to in front of the desk officer that was there was a white desk officer. That was another white sergeant that was there that was receiving the kids coming in. So he said, "What do you have?" He says, "Oh, these monkeys was out here throwing rocks at cars." So I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "Monkeys?" I said, "Don't you ever let me hear you use that term again." You know, I said, these are young boys out here, and they just got misguided in doing things. I said, these young men are not monkeys, and don't you let me hear that roll out of your mouth. So the ironic thing was that after that sergeant processed the young boys, and then I told the officer to make sure he called the parents and have the parents come in and let them know what happened. But we went to the back, me and that white officer. I went to the back, and the white sergeant came back there, and he said to me, he said, "Vernon," he said, he didn't mean that, calling them monkeys. Now I just told you the scenario, so now you determine what he meant. He meant what he said. But the point of the matter is that being in that position, I could take that stance and call that out. But just being a minor person, that's a regular police officer, you have to understand where your lane and your position is. So that's very important that we understand that as you go up the ladder, as Dr. Lacey says, you want to make sure you're about change. Whether you become a politician, but a politician that is for your community and that's going to do what's right, not to be influenced by monetary values. It's about having the values, what is necessary to improve your community. So that's it.
I have a question for both of you. Is there any advice that you can give to youth in regards to their interactions with police during this time, based on your experiences, especially young Black male youth? Any tips you would have for them?
So off the top, I'd say, as I tell my own young son and others, use caution. That's where I start. Disengage as much as you possibly can. Limit your dialogue to yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Where you going over there, ma'am? Where you going over there, sir? Can you call my parent, please? If you're under arrest, stop talking. Don't even engage any deeper. Don't try to talk yourself out of it because you didn't talk yourself into it, right? So you might be smooth and sweet on the street with other people, but you're not going to do this. You'll know quickly whether you got the good police or the bad police. So just shut down the dialogue because they use everything against you. Just as we saw with the Breonna Taylor case. Now, clearly her boyfriend was interviewed right after she had been shot, and they used everything in his interview without an attorney present to prosecute him initially, but they gave the officer that killed Breonna Taylor almost a week before he had to give a statement. So they could then craft his statement around the information. So I tell them, don't talk. Just be quiet. If you're assaulted, if you're beat by the police, ask to go to the hospital. If you're injured, continue to ask to go to the hospital. Every shift, every commander asks to go to the hospital. When you get to the hospital, tell every nurse and every doctor exactly what had happened to you, because that becomes an official record and they will put it in the record and you can subpoena that record later. Also, if you're already having a bad encounter with the police, do not ask their name and badge number. Either learn to see the badge number when you see them, because if you ask for the name and badge number, you might as well say, let's fight and give me a bogus charge. Because you're going to charge me with assault, resisting arrest, failure to comply, loitering, the same old basic charges all the time in our community. So I want my young people to disengage as much as possible, because I don't trust their de-escalation skills in terms of the police. They may not de-escalate. We need to just say we're not engaging them. And if you're under arrest, you're under arrest. Go with it, right? Now, if you're fighting for your life, that's a different conversation, because there are other states where there's a self-defense law. This one isn't one, and I don't think New York is one. However, I think in Michigan, there is a self-defense law where I would give a little slightly different advice, because you have a right to fight for your life. I'll say that. And I want to say that for folks who believe it, but I'm not encouraging young people to go toe-to-toe with the police over something minor. Case in point, that's my criticism of Chauvin and the police officers in Minneapolis. The penalty for a fake $20 bill is not the death penalty. I've had people with counterfeit money. I come in, I see the person, I take the money, I verify their ID, I do a police report, I send them on their way, and we send it over to the Secret Service. So that's my advice.
Thank you.
And just to add, like Dr. Lacey said, let's win the battle, you know, as far as, excuse me, let's win the war, and let's not get caught up in the battle. I don't know if anybody remember, well, some of you young people might not know, there was a movie called Fresh. Brother Tad might know, and there was an incident where the young boy and his friend, he had a young friend, they were on a train, and they were, and one on the train, he was just like all gun-ho and everything else. And at the time, they were doing something really bad. But the young boy that was fresh, he was telling the officer that was addressing his friend who was talking all this and that at the officer. So he utilized proper techniques where he was able to talk to the officer and say, "Excuse me, officer." So that's one of the things. I'm sorry for my friend's attitude and everything else. He didn't mean it or whatever. In the sense of just being cautious and being able to be somewhat professional or having a proper mannerism when you're talking to the police officers. It's like basically souping them up, you know. But it's really being respectful, you know, being respectful for the rank of what the authority is, not the person. Because like Dr. Lacey say, sometimes you can get a person and they can be just the worst thing in the world, no matter what. But if you maintain respect and you maintain holding the respect of who you are, then you can basically de-escalate some of these things that happens out here. Not to say that it's going to happen, but utilizing the proper respectful mannerisms can also de-escalate certain things. Because there's a lot of times I've known people who been stopped by the police and might be driving, and then let alone the police comes up to the car, and a lot of things we've taught in what to do when stopped by the police. Make sure you turn on the lights, put your hands on the wheel so they can see the hands, and when the officer comes, if depending, you say, "Good afternoon, officer. I'm sorry. What seems to be the problem?" You know, and so. And that there just starts to control the what I'm trying to say,
the engagement,
right? The engagement, the conversation, the engagement, the conversation. So so the young folks, you control the conversation, and then a lot of things too. You got to make sure, like Dr. DeLacy said, if there's somebody else in the car with you and you're the driver, and they're saying anything, you tell them, "This is my car. Let me say everything else. You be quiet, and there's one person be the one that's talking." Those are the most important things in the sense of de-escalating. You don't need several people in here becoming part-time lawyers, and they know what to do. So this is one of the things you want to look at.
That's great advice. I wanted to just add on a mental health note. Sometimes when youth are angry, and the prime age for like protesting is around like 18 to 24. They have a lot of energy ready to, but I look at things like a game of chess. You got to be strategic. And so the advice is like that the advice that you both just gave was excellent. It's not going to make you less of anything to know how to pick your battles and fight wisely. You can't fight the whole system of racist police with one police officer, puff your chest and start to, you know, display bravado with one police officer. It's not going to really result. It's not going to result in getting out that anger, you know, getting anything done. You're just going to have your anger turn against you. So finding spaces to vent out that frustration to the system in a safe way, in a way that's not going to come back at you and harm you, is key. That's why also another reason why therapy is good, because in therapeutic spaces, you can go ahead and lash out at your anger, and then you can think clearly and be strategic. So if you're caught up in a situation, I never really shared this story, but I actually had run-ins with the police in New York City as well as a licensed social worker, because I fit a description. And very quickly did I realize that these police officers were very, well, a few of them, not all of them, were quick to become very worked up. So I had to be strategic and just shut my mouth. And then at the end of the day, everything was thrown away, but they were ready to fight and they were waiting for me. They didn't care who I was. They didn't care that I had degrees. They didn't care. They just saw a Black woman, you know, that whatever they decided to create that story. And I could see it in their eyes that it wasn't the time or place for me to try to act big and brave. I'll say brave, I'll say big and tough unnecessarily. So definitely, I say it's a game of chess. Be strategic and pick your battles and fight wisely. And protect your mental health too. Because, yeah, so great advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Often, Black people, because culturally we are loud by nature, we talk loud. When I was in School of Nursing, we did cultural, we were trained on cultural diversity, on how not to assume that Africans, like African Americans, are aggressive because by their culture, we talk loud. And therefore, when you are hearing them talk, we're naturally loud and should not be seen like the white people who are quiet, or the Chinese who don't, you know, who speak quietly are not the same as Black people. So there should be, what I'm trying to say is there should be like a cultural training, and it should not be assumed that Black people, you know, talking in loud voices means that we're fighting against one another or that we're being disrespectful when we talk. I don't know if the police are being trained on cultural awareness and checking their biases. I work for New York City, and I know that we do go for training to check our biases, and because we deal with a community, we deal with gay community, we deal with all kinds of culture in my line of work. So you are taught to check. You're dealing with the public, you have to check your bias to make sure it does not interfere with your work. You understand that you don't bring it into your workplace, that it starts affecting your work. I don't know if the police get that kind of training. Could you help us?
Yes, I'm going to read something to you that I've been fortunate enough to pick up in my research. So New York City signed an agreement, NYPD signed an agreement December 2017 with a company that includes, I know, Lori Friedel, who's also someone in the field of my research study, and I wanted to see what they were getting paid to do. And what they're getting paid to do, their curricula is founded on the following fundamental principles. All people, even well-intentioned people, have biases. Having biases is normal to human functioning. Biases are often unconscious or implicit, thus influencing choices and actions without conscious thinking or decision-making. Police actions based on biases or stereotypes are unsafe, ineffective, and unjust. Fairness and impartiality are the cornerstones of procedural justice and important for the achievement of agency legitimacy. Officers can learn skills to reduce and manage their own biases Supervisors can learn skills to identify biased behavior in their direct reports and take corrective action when they detect biased decision-making. Public safety executives and their command level staff can implement a comprehensive agency program to produce fair and impartial policing. So that's just an example of what's been signed for and what they've been paid to do. I don't know, I've not had an opportunity to evaluate the program, but I do know that New York City Police Department has at least paid about $5 million for that program. So they are being, at least on paper, taught to look at it from that perspective. I don't know how effective it is.
One of the things I always say, we got a lot of cultural awareness training, you know, but the fact is that when you have these European counterparts that come, they come to the fact that they've been assigned to come to that training, but that don't mean that that's only one day of training or once a year of that training. So as far as them, so, you know, like as young people, you know, when you go to class and they may teach you about this or teach you about that, you might ignore certain lessons, and these lessons are lessons of life. But if you are brought up in a superior culture, or or a dominating culture that sometimes overwhelms and looks at everybody else as being inferior, you in a culture that says, well, all I'm here to do is listen, but they have to listen to me. That's the superiority, or what we call, instead of calling it white supremacy in the African village, we call it white fragility, because of the fact that white folks are afraid the fact that they will be identified by their inferiority to that they're not, that we are all equal, and that no way or shape or fashion throughout the time in this country that they feel that they are always threatened by. It's a race. That's what a race is, in the sense of the race that they hold on to, not the human race, but they hold on to the color of your skin. One of the things that I know I heard a brother say is that as Sister Marshall said, that she fit the description. One of the things about fitting the description, we all wear uniforms. Every day we wear uniforms, not the police uniform. Our uniform is our melanin. So our melanin represents our uniform. So melanin is our blackness. So once we step out of the door into the public, you know, you fit the description, because your melanin says, listen, there's a black person, and this is what, and this here world, in a sense, should be a white world. So that's one of the things, in the sense of, when you say we should have these biases, and understand with the policing dealing with law enforcement. So if there is a sense of an individual and you see something that's wrong going on, you have to step up and let them know that this is something that won't be tolerated. And so this here has to be enforced in the police department by the supervisors to uphold what's right about treating everyone. And so that in the sense that you're sharing, Sister Jane, is very important, that it is enforced, in the sense that, yes, we can have all the training in the world, you know, but you know, here in New York City, we went through a multiple training, you know, and pulling out the gun was the last resort. Would be on your mind is thinking about taking someone's life. And so, but yet and still, white folks, they do that. And if you see certain scenarios, you'll see certain different videos of white people confronting other white people with weapons. If they had a stick or if they have a knife, they'll do everything to for the last resort. They won't even shoot their own. They'll even take being injured by that. So it's a biasness that continues to go on, and that's a biasness that has to be supervised, because one of the things Dr. DeLacy said, the organization that we're also in, the National Coalition of Law Enforcement for Justice, Accountability, and reform. Those are the things that we stand for. The accountability is the fact that they understand one thing: punishment. You take away their salaries, you know, you take away their positions, and it changes everything, and they'll slow down. Because as you see, and if you have read in the papers or on social media, that they a lot of them are quitting now. You know, they're saying, you know, but in the long run, they may have quit with the group, but I bet you they'll be running back for those salaries. So one of the things that's so important is that we enforce that these people have to be punished equally, just as well as we're punished for doing wrong. They have to be punished for the same.
Amazing. Did you want to say something?
Go on.
Okay. I know I've been quiet. I'm just taking everything in. So speaking of accountability, this is very personal for me because I've noticed up till now the officers haven't been arrested in terms of Breonna Taylor, you know. So there has been protests since I forgot the guy's name that got killed. I just blanked out.
George Floyd.
George Floyd.
May he rest in peace. There has been protests, and I've noticed there has been Black Lives Matter murals on the streets, you know, even in front of the Trump Towers. But I've noticed that in terms of the laws changing, there hasn't been much action taking place, you know. Companies, large corporations are standing behind the Black Lives Matter movement, but I feel like, you know, it's a lot of action, it's a lot of words saying we stand with you guys, but at the same time, in terms of the laws, it's like there is no change, you know. You mentioned earlier, sir, that you know, it's time to give the youth a chance, and you guys are basically taking the back seat. And I myself, I haven't been to any protests since this started because I'm a little frustrated, and I'm 30 years old. So yeah, I used to be in Black Power movements in college, and we used to fight for systemic change then. And it's been 10 years now, and I haven't seen any type of change, and it's very frustrating. Do you all believe that change is gonna happen in our lifetime?
So I'll try that first. Change is relative. And so let me start there because it depends on how you define change. If you remember, I started talking about only 2 Black police officers having any conversation while still in uniform talking about police brutality in 1991. So while we're here in 2020 and everybody's talking now, while that's progress, it's not sufficient for me. I believe that institutionalized racism requires an institutionalized response. Now, there's certainly a couple of super Negroes all across the country doing some great things. But while we got super Negroes doing great things, we're losing our community exponentially. And even you talk about the frustration. I think that we have to define what we think change looks like. So one, in terms of laws changing, that's a legislative process. And so we must understand the process. We must engage the process. Certainly, voting is not the end all be all, but it is a part of the process. So if you're asking me, is there change? Yes, there's change. If we look at some of the elected officials, if we look at the squad, that's change. That's why they've attacked those sisters hard, because they've made change where they've gone against the status quo. They're not asking permission from white men. They're not towing the line with Negro Democrats, okay? They're saying we're gonna step outside the box. We're gonna align ourselves for sisters of color across the country, and we're gonna fight for change. Change, you correctly identified all the things that people are doing. And I was honored to bring Queen Mother Sister Winnie Mandela here in 1999 from South Africa. And so what you described is what she would call ceremony without substance. Because we talked about when Nelson Mandela, at that time he was her ex-husband, had become the president of the country. And she says, DeLacy, my son, I want you to remember that he may be president, but he controls nothing. He's president ceremonially, but the apparatus of the government is still in the hands of the Afrikaners. And so when we talk about making change and is change coming, you are the change. So we wield billions of dollars as African people. We've got to move our money in a particular kind of way. We've got to not give our dollars to our enemy to beat us with, period. So whether you decide you want to go into real estate, whether you want to deal with the election, whether you want to deal with the voting process, you've got to identify your niche. When I started this in 1991, I had no idea that I'd be on a national stage. Lionel Tate, the 12-year-old, and some of you are young, so you may not remember him, but in 2001, he had done a wrestling move in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He was 12 years old, and he accidentally killed his 6-year-old cousin, Tiffany Unick. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. A brother that I had arrested in New Jersey for drugs was in a rehab program in Florida, saw his mother that Sunday, had her call me at the police station that Monday, that Wednesday I was in court. He was sentenced that Wednesday to life without parole. We spent 3 years fighting to get him out. 3 years later, I walked him out of jail. We went to Rome, Italy to meet with Pope John Paul II. Johnny Cochran did the appeal. The NBA basketball player Grant Long put up $50,000 to pay for the appeal, and we walked this kid out of jail. Lots of people came together. Part of the problem is when we don't define what change looks like and you don't know what's happening, of course you get frustrated. Now, in terms of the laws, that's like moving the Titanic, but it's doable because all politics is local, right? You're 30 years old. You're good and ready to be, you're right for whatever it is you want to do, and you got to go after it and do it. That's why I talked about not so much of taking a back seat. I'm 58 years old, but stepping back so that you in your prime as a young person can take the lead. Okay, I'm on the phone every day with young people all over the country. I'm mentoring young people. I'm mentoring older people. So we've got to find what it looks like. We talk about, as the young sister said, and I said reimagining public safety, right? You define what it looks like for you. What change do you want to see, and what change do we want to invest our resources in making? But thank you for that question.
Yes, oh my God. Dr. DeLacy, you touched at the very core of why I started this foundation, which is empowering our young ones, letting them understand that they are the future, that they have the ability to change, to bring change to the Black man, to when I say to the Black nation.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
If they understand what it takes politically, they must be involved in politics.
Yes.
They must set aside because they must work towards that change they want, not just for them, for their children.
That's right.
For the next generation. That's at times when I start talking, I get so passionate about this. The youth, we have to teach them to understand. We have to get away from those who try to divide us. You understand? All Black, we have to be one to get rid of in order to fight our common enemy. We are so busy getting divided, fighting over little pettiness that we end up losing the battle which is before us. That's and right. Our children must get away from that in order to succeed. They must get away, get involved in their community. They should not think the community is about the adult. They must get involved because that's where it starts. Your community get involved with the politics of them. That's where you make change. Change starts from each and every one of you.
That's right.
You have to step out and take control
Absolutely.
Of that change.
Absolutely. I was 27 years old when I started Black Cops Against Police Brutality. I developed a consciousness. I joined the police force at 23. I didn't join the police force to help people. I joined the police force to finance my music career. I'm a percussionist. I play congas. I play percussion instruments. I play drums. And all I wanted was enough money to go in the studio. I'm just being honest, right? Because I talked to some of the young people that want to be rappers. I said, do you understand that that's like the lowest part of the damn totem pole? Not that you can't be a rapper, but they got producers. You've got engineers. You've got the people that own it. You got the people that are executive producers. You have the people that own the label. Like there's so many other places. We didn't even talk about the publishing yet. But I understood that at 19. And I was blessed because the elders were teaching me. I sit at the feet of the elders. right? I'm on the shoulders of African people. And that's why I'm even here with Brother Vernon and you giving this time, because I'm obligated as a Black man who has been insulated by the village of African people across the diaspora. I owe it to the next generation to impart this to you. So what happens is that I became a police officer. I said, well, if I become a police officer, this was my logic. I was 23 years old when they hired me. I can buy a 3-family house. I'll buy a house in the area where I walk the beat, so I'll be invested in the community. I'll rent out one floor. I'll use the other floor to pay the mortgage, and I'll take the next floor to put money in the bank. And that's exactly what I did. By the time I retired, I had 4 homes, 4 children, right? And I've been all over the world. I've been to Ireland, Scotland, England, Belgium, Wales, Russia, Spain, Guadeloupe, Jamaica, South Africa, South Korea, Dnepropetrovsky, just from believing what you just said to me, Sister Fatima, that I wanted to see change. And so I needed to be the change that I wanted to see. I had to engage, right? Whether you go into a legislative office and volunteer on a campaign so you understand how the laws are written, right? When I pick up the phone now, we're calling all over the country, but not because I'm well connected. I'm still a kid from the hood, right? Just well educated, but I've made relationships. You know, Dr. Joy DeGruy, the author of Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and my sister, she talks about the axiology of a group of people. What do they value? For the Caucasian, it is person to object or thing, right? To our Asian brothers and sisters, it is person to group. But to African people, it is person to person. We value the relationship. And so we have to build these strong foundational relationships, and as Sister Jane said, in which we are united, and unity is not uniformity. So you and I can be united. Me and Brother Vernon are brothers, but we don't agree on everything. And where we disagree, we don't have to talk about it. In fact, we got some people we disagree with in common that we alluded to, and we didn't talk about them in this space. Why? Because we use a Malcolm approach. If there's 10 issues on the table and we agree on 7, let's work on the 7 we agree on. And the 3 that we disagree on, leave them off the table. That's the approach we have to take. I don't have to, well, I don't like his hair. I don't like his glass. Well, he's light skinned, he's dark skinned. No, he is my brother, and he is not heavy. I will carry my brother to the last breath in me, because I know my brother will carry me. I'll be even more transparent. So today, in doing this, and I've been doing Zooms for the last 6 weeks. So Brother Vernon was my contact person. He called me. I got the flyer. I put the flyer up, but I'm working. And I'm working every day, all day. I had just gotten in, climbed into bed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because I've been up since 2 this morning, walking my 3 miles, the whole bit. He said, brother, you on for 4? I said, brother, I'm sure glad you called me, because you would have missed me. I would have been in the bed counting sheep or something. And he said, well, brother, I sent you the flyer. I said, and you did. So I couldn't say he was wrong, right? But I was very honest with my brother and transparent. And we're brothers, just as our sisters are connected. And so it is that love, it is that agape love, that pure African love that we must embrace. We must love ourselves. We must, so, you know, I've got all this going through my mind now. Sister Jessica was talking about the mental health and the mental wellness. And one of the things I had written down was we have to be clear, especially with the boys, that we bring men together in men's group and boys groups so that they can be vulnerable, right? I've got young men that I met when they were 16, 17, had never been hugged by a man in a non-sexual way in their life at 16. I couldn't imagine it. My son, Karim, who's now 37, said to me, he said, Dad, you know, I started kissing you on the cheek when I watched your mentor kiss you. The first time I saw a man kiss a man that wasn't sexual was in Ghana. I had never seen men show that kind of intimacy and love for another man. I now understand it, and it embodies me. But that is all a part of who we are when we're unmolested culturally as African people.
Amazing.
And you know, it's important, as Dr. Lacey hits on that culture is one of the things that we have to bring forth. Sister Jane, you're Nigerian?
Yes, I am.
So you have to bring forth that culture and the standards and morality that you bring from your culture of Nigeria, and we have to share that with the young people, and we have to be the role models to uphold that. You know, every day we have to have something to stand on and who we are and what we are here for. We're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors and what our ancestors have meant for us to do in this society. Sister Fatima, you may have joined certain organizations, and certain things may have not advanced or changed in what you may have saw. but things are changing in the sense that we have to go back to those ancestors and look at what they did, and they might, a lot of them, they say it was ahead of their time. Everybody always talk about Malcolm was so far ahead of his time, you know, and if you go back and look at people like Malcolm, right now with this social media, we have the opportunity to review a lot of our ancestors and our great speakers that spoke. You know, I one of the persons who shoulders I stand on it is Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen. And Dr. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of him before, but he was one of the ones that connected us to ancient Egypt, and what we call it is Kemet. And so when we connect to our ancient ancestral connection, we can understand what our ancestors did hundreds of years, thousands of years ago. And some of the things that we've learned, in the sense that we get distracted by what is success, the successful standard that this country puts out and causes us to focus on and strive for. So if we can bring back our focus on what the values and morals of ancient African society is all about, that should be outstanding to what we need to stand on. At the African Village, before the COVID-19, we were meeting at least three times a month on Sundays, but we were dealing with our African belief system, you know, so and not someone else's belief system, not to believe in someone else that doesn't look like us, but to believe in ourselves and our ancestors that have brought that forth. So those are things that are so important for us to stand on, because a lot of things that we had years ago, back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, now that you're here, the young folks are standing here on the 90s, 2000, 2020. This is it. It's the time. You have so much available to you to make a difference, you know, as far as social media. Look at us now. We're utilizing technology. Everyone is talking from their houses or their offices or whatever they have been, or their phones, and they're connecting. And we didn't have this before. You know, luckily they even have a phone. So this here is something to look at, to take advantage of and make something of. Because before, you know, the way things were going, we were organizing and having buildings. And then like Dr. DeLacy said, is the fact that you're investing in real estate. So now we don't have to worry about the real estate. It's just the investment of having a Zoom or whatever platform that is available to us to be on. So look at those things as advantages and what you can do to connect. Young people can connect and definitely always have at least 2 or 3 elders on those calls with you, so that can inspire and guide you. So it's always giving homage and respect to the elders.
Thank you. I have a question. What you and Dr. DeLacy said before, about how, like, if we all have a common ground in something, like, to change, if like we agree on 7 things and disagree on the other 3, we should focus on the 7 things. But what if that 7th thing is, I know it's not like a lot, but it's a lot of Black men, per se, like when it comes to, you know how people say Black women are strong, this, that, and the third, but like, when is it enough? Like, you can't be strong all the time. Like, I feel like it's hard. Okay, sorry. What I'm trying to say is that recently with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, on Twitter especially, there was we were all first just focused on like what's going on with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, all of that. And then it turned into like Black women speaking up on like the things they don't like that Black men do, or just stuff like that. And what I was seeing a lot was that they weren't really understanding.
They
like,
who?
Well, when I say they, Black men, well, at least from what I saw on Twitter, on my page, a lot of people, and there's also people who disagreed, who spoke against a lot of other Black men, but like, when you have all these like celebrities, all these like speakers and stuff, all these like high powerful men with not with Black women, and then they say they're for Black women. I understand. It's just, how can they say they want to fight with us, right, and fight for us, we're all one, but then their actions kind of, it is not the same. And that's what I was just thinking, because I understand that, yeah, okay, so we have the agreement that we're all fighting for Black men, like, well, police brutality, right? But then all these other things, like, I feel like police brutality cannot fully be relinquished if we don't handle that matter with like within our own community. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I'm just trying to figure out, how can we, besides speaking up, but how can we like stop, like how can we end the problems within our own community? That's what I'm also saying. Because we have to handle what's within first before we can truly, I feel like, fight against. But yeah, you go.
So I think you said a lot. I'll take a little bit of it because it's a lot to unpack. I heard you talk about Black men with white women. I heard you talk about Black men who accomplished claiming to believe in Black women but don't have Black women on their arms. I heard you talk about Black men and Black women starting out talking about defending Black men against police brutality, and then it devolving into Black women versus Black men, and Black men not walking their talk. And I hear you asking at the end of the day, how can we fight for change outside of the house if we haven't settled the differences in the house? Did I get you right?
Yes, basically, okay. Yes.
Now, having said that, I'll just take a few pieces, not a lot. I'll leave some for the minister. I think that it's not either or, it's both and. So if your house was on fire on the inside and the outside, you wouldn't say, let me put it out on the inside before I fight the outside. The hope would be that somebody is putting the fire out on the outside of the building while we're also trying to put it out on the inside. And so there's some conversations that I believe that we can't have digitally. I believe certainly that there is this dichotomy between Black men and Black women that has always existed for a lot of different reasons. I don't think it's very simple and can be all answered here today. Now, this is just me speaking. I believe that Black men have come up short with Black women. I started talking about that in the very beginning. I believe that wholeheartedly, and I apologize for that. So let me say that right now to all these beautiful sisters. I apologize because I'm raising 4 children that are not my birth children. And I'm not raising them because there was nothing else to do. I'm raising them because in some instances, and at least the ones that I know of personally, some Black men didn't show up for their children. Some Black men came up short. Some Black men walked away from their children. Some of them just said, well, if I can't have your mother when I want, the way I want, anytime I want, then I don't want you either. That's a reality. That's a pain in our community that we have to deal with. And it is not simply fixed in this conversation, but I want to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge you for raising some of that. And I want to acknowledge my sisters. And for the brothers that are doing what we should be doing, I acknowledge and honor those brothers. But there are many of us who are not. And that is a conversation that we need to have amongst ourselves in the village with each other, because it's a problem, right? I've got four girls. I got my birth daughter, my 3 adopted daughters, but I also have goddaughters and godsons. And I have these kinds of conversations with them. Don't walk away. If you're walking away from your mother and your sister now, I'm worried about you walking away from your wife and your daughter later, right? The other piece of it is that, you know, I just had this talk with a friend. They said, well, DeLacy, would you date outside the race? No. Why not? Because there's so many strong, beautiful, wonderful Black women who absolutely would be honored to have the village united with Black men and Black women. And our sisters need us. Because as I said earlier, our sisters have stood for us all the time. All the time. I can name from all different stratas in terms of having lots of money to no money. Sisters always stand up, period. And I know that. That's been my story. That's been my experience. And so we owe Black women. Finally, I will say this, that we need to work simultaneously. Sister Jessica was talking about our mental wellness, right? That's a piece we have to address. In all of our families, I believe, we all have incest in the family. We've got molestation. We've got dysfunction. We've got all of these things that show up. It's the trauma manifesting itself in all these behaviors that some of us pretend don't exist. They're in my family, period. They're there. And we've had to address it. I've had to address it. Even when my daughter, her mom and I split, when my daughter was 19 years old, we decided to have a talk 5 years later. And I said, what do you regret about me as your dad? And she said, point blank, I wish that when you and my mom split, y'all had done a better job. And so I had to own that and accept that, because that's the truth of the matter. And that's how it landed on the child at 14. And so now we have a great relationship now, but I had to consciously work at it. I had to hear that painful conversation from my child about me. And then I had to take a look at me, not only be self-reflective, but self-aware. How am I impacting the village that I want to be a part of and that I want to be a man in? I got to hear that. That's why I heard what you said. Even though you're young and you were trying to make sure that you were politically correct and get it across, I needed to listen as best I could to make sure I could hear you. So rather than try to say, I think she's saying this, I restated it to get your confirmation that that's what you're saying. Thank you for taking us there.
Yes.
I had a question.
Okay.
So, like, going off of what you were saying, how do you have a conversation with someone who just isn't willing to listen? Like, because I feel like a lot of older people just aren't willing to listen to younger people. And you could be as articulate as you can be as at your teenage or young adult, but they just aren't trying to hear your side of the story. How would you go about communicating your point to them, or do you just leave them be?
Well, that's a great question. So in the work that we do with the Family Support Organization, we help families needs. And so sometimes we have an expression that we say you must roll with readiness. And people aren't ready, so you have to roll. Now, having said that, that does not mean that we don't make the effort. And so in part of making the effort, the question is, and there's a lot of things you didn't say, so I'm just making some assumptions, but is the person open to hearing somebody else? Sometimes we use what's called a third-party intermediary. Sometimes they may not want to hear the young person, but they'll hear somebody else that the young person can talk to who can talk to them. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who's 10 years older than me, he says that I mentor him. He's out of state living. He has a 35-year-old son that I've known since he was 15. The son is very disrespectful. He doesn't have a lot of respect for his dad, money, women, the whole nine. So they've been like this for a few years. The son called me today and said, Uncle D, I just want to tell you something. Thank you. I said, why? He says, because I finally got to spend a day with my dad. I picked him up at 8 o'clock this morning. We spent the entire day together. We went to lunch, we did this, and I tried to do the things that you advised. Now my point to you, it doesn't always go that way, but the other one's almost 65, right? So there was a third party intermediary. Sometimes, for example, in my agency, my staff are between 27 and 65. And so my 60-somethings don't always understand my 20-somethings. And so I happen to be the buffer. And I have to say to the 60-somethings, they have a right to have that view. They have a right to experience life on their terms. And you don't get because you're 60-something. That doesn't make you an elder because you're old. Let me be clear about that. And let me try to be respectful in saying it, because I don't know who's behind the black screens, right? But because you make you an elder.
Wait, say that again. You were breaking up. Say that again.
I said elders, as they get older, they get wiser. Old people are just old and in the way.
I think, going off what you said, I think part of the problem with the Black community is we are not trained to talk over things with the children. Children are seen, in my era, it's like children are seen, not heard.
That's right.
Yeah, and if I was to say things to my dad, just looking at me, giving me the eyes enough to shut my mouth.
Right.
And so you come off, okay, you don't want to raise a child, you don't want to do what was done to you. And then you either go to extreme, you either overindulge the other way, or continue the cycle, you know, that you were raised. Because growing up, there are certain things I didn't like. But then when I became, my father was a great philanthropist, for example. And he would take people he didn't know from, you know, people would come to him, he don't know them, and he just start picking up their education. And every time it's time to go to school, you go down to his office, you see this queue of strangers waiting to get their school fees or pocket money or whatever their problem is. And then you go into school, you come to your dad, you tell him, Dad, I need a new shoe, I need this. Right in front of you, he will give a stranger money for new shoes, and he will call his secretary and say, take your shoe to the shoemaker. For me, that was kind of devastating. I didn't like it. I felt strangers were, you know, that he didn't love me, that he cared more for these people that I don't know, and I didn't really like it. But fast forward, and he used to make us go to the farm too, you know, even though just to experience farming, even though we didn't have to. That he instilled that in us. Growing up, I didn't like it. But when I became the person that I am, when I grew up and I look back, I appreciated the training that he gave. He made me hungry. He made me want to show him that I don't need him, that I'm going to be somebody myself. And upon his death, we were so overwhelmed. People we didn't know, so many people were there to show gratitude. We were like dumbfounded, like perplexed. So many people for 1 month, we were in, you know, people just came to pay homage to this man, and it made me feel ashamed for all the things I said to him, you know, for not being more appreciative of the person he was and what he stood for. And till today, we are all in our different ways trying to walk his footsteps, even though we know we can fill that shoes, that gap that he has set. So I do understand what the kids are saying, and all I can say to them is to bear with us, you know, keep talking to us, that we would listen. I'm guilty of her question. With my daughter, we constantly fight. You know, that age thing in terms of she not understanding me and me not understanding her. But I do try to create time to understand, to talk it over at the end of the day, because I know better. So it's like education that has to go on in the Black family.
Yes.
You know, one of the things I wanted to say is that, Sister Jane, you ought to be commended because of having this foundation that you have here to do this thing with the young ladies that are on here and some of the men. I just wanted to say, I see maybe one male here, and I see several young ladies. I don't know how many males are in your organization, but you're commended to the fact that you reach out to the young people, and that this is your way of trying to correct some of the wrongs that have been taught or that you may have grew up with. We all are, you know, because, you know, I learned in this European system, and now that I'm been trained to go into studying my African culture, I understand better, you know, some of the things that are out here, and understand. I myself have a daughter that's about to be 19 years old, and at times, you know, we'll go at it back and forth, but like you say, you know, you have to step back and pause and just listen to what they're saying. Like, why are you saying this? And young people, you have to look at where your influence is coming from. I always used to say, watch out for the outside influence, and understand that, are you saying the outside influence is better than what's in this household? And why are you saying that? You know, in the sense that, what are you being attracted by? Because those people that are celebrities, you know, the celebrities are the people that are here right now. Brother Tad, Sister Marshall, Dr. DeLacy, and Sister Jane, for doing what they're doing, and offering that stuff. So we have to look at those immediate people, not those people on the screen, because, they listen, European culture puts people up, and then you start to focus on them, and you don't really know them in the sense of their values till later on down the road. They introduce their value system. You're like, hold up. What are you talking about? We had the instance that R. Kelly, listen, I say R. Kelly is a great singer. He made some great songs, but his lifestyle was tremendously wrong. So we have to look at that. It was chaotic and very destructive to young women, in a sense. So what we have to do is analyze the people that we focus on, and like Sister Jane shared, not knowing, how much her father had put into the community, and the fact that might have felt that he was like not looking at, and it's something that we have to learn to balance. Have a balance. So we can all say, well, he should have did this, he should have did that. But she realized that he was doing what his assignment was in this land of the living at the time.
Oh wow, this is just so pleased. Does anybody have more questions?
I had a question for Mr. Cromwell.
Mr. Cromwell, question for you.
I'm listening.
Hi. Your better days ahead fitness thing. I just wondered, because just that title in itself is like very inspiring. Like, it's very uplifting, especially for what we're doing now with We Can Breathe. Mental
I'm
health.
sorry, teacher. Can you talk a little louder? It's hard for me to hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a fitness program called Better Days Ahead. And I wanted to ask you, where'd you get that the name from? Like, why'd you choose that? Like, what happened to spike that?
That's a good question. What happened to me was life. Life has happened, and I was once a young person growing up in the hood with a lot of challenges. And as Minister Wells said, Giuliani was an enemy to law enforcement. Giuliani was also an enemy to people who weren't in law enforcement, such as myself, So in the era that I grew up in, I was faced with a lot of challenges. And just when I thought that things were bleak and that I wouldn't overcome the hurdle, somehow I made it through. But even once I got past that hurdle, there was another hurdle and another hurdle. And then I just got accustomed to challenges and realizing that I had to overcome these obstacles, and realizing that is what life is pretty much about. Regardless of whatever we go through, there's always better days ahead. So I had to keep that in my mind, because no matter what challenges I faced, and I've done faced some challenges being a young man in the streets, being involved with gangs, losing childhood friends to gun violence, literally witnessing my friends be murdered on more than one occasion. That was troublesome. I think Sister Jessica talked about the trauma. And I realized that I was brought up where trauma was normalized. As Dr. DeLacy noted, he talked about our sister, Dr. Joy DeGruy, who wrote the excellent book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And what your mom is doing is a great thing, bridging the gap between Africans on the continent and Africans in the diaspora. Because what has happened was, us Africans here in the diaspora, we were traumatized to the point that getting mental health help was actually shunned. It was shunned and it was frowned upon. To go seek help for the things we had to deal with, you were cited as crazy, and nobody wanted to be involved with someone crazy. Nobody even wanted to be known as crazy. That's part of the stigma Sister Jessica was talking about. But when we peel back the layers and look at our more than 400-year sojourn as Africans in America, we've been traumatized since we left the shores of the continent. And why I say it was more than 400 years, because 400 years only speaks to the British rule. It doesn't talk about the Dutch and the Portuguese that got involved in a transatlantic slave kidnapping in the early 1500s that actually brought us here. So it was actually more than 400 years, but you're talking about a minimum 400 years of violence, terrorism, rape, and trauma that has permeated all the way up to the 1970s and 1980s and the 1990s, which was my generation. But as the young sister said earlier, you know, in talking to elders, that time we didn't know how to articulate. We didn't know how to express these emotions that we had, so we acted out. And in acting out, there were consequences to our behaviors. Joining gangs, drinking 40 ounces, smoking weed. Some friends graduated from weed and went on to smoking crack and totally destroyed their life, to the point that we really thought there was nothing to live for. But by the grace of God, we have survived some things. And then we had elders who shared their stories of troubles of being children, growing up in the South, you know, growing up in different parts of the country. So our troubles weren't unique once we sat and spoke with our elders. So me personally, I took a lot of stories that I've learned from elders and my own personal stories and try to encourage people, no matter what we're going through, there's always better days ahead. We always have to be optimistic, because unfortunately for Africans in America, we always operate from a position of victimhood, because seldom do we hear about the victories that we have won. Yeah, things have been hard for Black people in America, but we can never forget the many victories that we have. That's what makes Dr. King so great. That's what makes Malcolm X so great, Martin Delany, and so many others. But what has happened was our stories of triumph have been buried beneath the lies. So we've always been told that we are a subservient group, that our lot is to be below European people, and Europeans' position should always be here. But part of the story that is left out is that not all Black people that came to America came as slaves, and not all white people that came to America came as free. That was a popular misconception. You know, but these are layers that have to be peeled back, that young people have to know early, so that you can have a proper direction and move forward. And my point is, again, you will have challenges and obstacles, but you always must be optimistic and keep in mind there are always better days ahead. So hence the name of my fitness company, because it's not just about physical fitness, but it's about physical, mental, and spiritual fitness. We have to have a holistic approach, and it's a trifecta. It's almost like a three-leg stool. The three legs will hold a stool up, but one of them legs are missing. One of those components of mental, physical, and spiritual components are missing, you're going to fall over. You're going to be out of balance. So it's very important that we always be optimistic, learn about the great things that we have done, because society always paints us as victims and failures and losers. And we are descendants of kings and queens. And that is literally, real quick, when I went to Ghana for the first time about 4 years ago, I've been to Ghana 4 times, but I've learned when I went to the Ashanti Palace that a lot of people were kidnapped, were actually people from the royal family, and they did that to demoralize the village. So when we talk about Africans in America being descendants of kings and queens, that's not just rhetoric. That is factual. That is factual, because it was done to demoralize the group. So as we fast forward to the 21st century, where we are now, anytime you see us on television, anytime you see us on the news, they always show our failures. They always show us purveyors of crime or victims of European crimes, subconsciously putting in our minds that we cannot win. But we have to study our story. We have to study the greats, because we are the only group on the planet that have overcome unsurmountable odds and still can smile and love people like we do. So regardless of what you go through, always remember there's always better days ahead. I'm gonna step off my soapbox.
And one of the things I want to do is put him back on the soapbox, because as being a physical fitness coach, you know, Brother Tad, also being a member of the African Village, he has competed in 2 New York City marathons, or completed 2 New York City marathons, and sometimes he gives for us inspiration. You should see how big he was back in the days. He would never have thought he would be able to be at this age and complete that. So
Jane knows also. Jane remembers the fat me. But see, and real quick, Chi, in life, we all have a story to tell. And every day we're constantly developing and tweaking our story. But we want our story to be one of motivation and inspiration. All right? We don't always want to walk around with the woe is me victim mentality. You know, I suffer from depression. And I'm being honest, we all being transparent. I do have a therapist that I speak with. And that is okay, because we need someone that we can talk to. someone we could let these things off of our chest, because if we don't, it leads to hypertension, it leads to stress, it leads to so many illnesses that are actually preventable, So even when you exercise, just by exercising alone and elevating your heart rate, you actually get your blood pumping through your body, and your blood carries all the nutrients and the oxygen that your body needs to function properly and optimally. So exercise is very important. And then it release feel-good hormones called dopamine. Things like, it's so many benefits to exercising. But again, physical fitness is just one component to your overall well-being. You need the mental fitness, and you need the spiritual fitness. We can't leave it out. It makes no sense having a nice looking car with a beat up engine or transmission. You want it to run optimally all around the board, and you have to look at your body and your life. And please understand me, young people, please understand me. You're gonna make mistakes. It's okay. Everybody make mistakes. Everybody make mistakes. Particularly when you make a big one, go back to your village. If you don't feel you can talk to your parents, talk to your aunties, your uncles, your mentors, your grandparents. Talk to someone and let them know, and try to get them to help you correct the mistakes. Mistakes are not the end of the world. They're only building blocks. Mistakes are building blocks. Real strength is in persistence, not to give up on any challenges and obstacles. All right? If I don't leave you with anything, please walk forward with that right there.
I definitely will. We definitely will.
So the question becomes, what is the way forward? What's Dr. DeLacy? I don't know, is Jessica still here?
She might have.
Dr. DeLacy's here.
Right, I know.
I'm here. I'm multitasking.
Okay. So
I'm coming back.
What is the way forward? How do we get together? How do we help our young ones to understand? Like, my question is in three parts. Maybe I should take them one by one. How do we get the Black community? I know people like Marcus Garvey have tried, all the Malcolm X, they made their dents. How do we, in this time, how do we reach our people? When I say our people, I mean the Black nation. How do we get them to work together so that we can achieve our full potential, both in the continent? Because at the end of the day, I feel like if somebody telling me go back to my continent, go back to my place, including your fellow Black people, how do we get all this together? What do you think?
Well, we had a prolific congressman by the name of Adam Clayton Powell, and he used to have this phrase: "Cast your buckets where you are." What you're doing right now, Jane, is part of the healing process. It's part of moving us forward. We have to continuously have these conversations, but not just amongst ourselves. We're having them with Chi-Chi. So now, next year, no one could come to her and try to tell her a lie about continental Africans and Africans in the diaspora, because she's sitting right beside you, getting this conversation. And anyone who tell her, even if they're a Black American, she can educate them on how they're wrong and their position is wrong, because all they will be regurgitating is things that they heard from Europeans. See, we don't have to truly travel all around the world, though it's great to travel around the world. I love visiting Africa. However, we have to do the work wherever we are. And particularly those that know better, we are charged with teaching those that don't know better. We can't just dismiss those who don't know what we know, because as God has blessed us with the wherewithal, the brain, and the mindset to move forward and acquire this knowledge to better our community, when we see the problem, we have to apply the solution, which is conversations, which is education. And we have to constantly do this with young children by our sides and constantly educate them, because there's always a teaching moment when we're here in America.
Absolutely.
I hope that answers your question.
No,
Yes, but most importantly, my question is also based on teaching because there are so many misinformation about Africa in the media. And I think part of this misinformation is to diminish us as Black people, to make us look like our history or where we come from, our original place is messed up, is not a place that we should be proud of. I think that is part of the mental, do I say torture, that makes you feel like inferior, or help them to get like the upper hand.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I would like to add is the fact that here at the African Village, what we try to do is to connect, like as Brother Tad was able to bring me in to come on, and then I was able to reach out to Dr. DeLacy. So this is how we work and operate. Sister Jane, you have a foundation, and so one of the things is education. So you can look into education, because Dr. DeLacy said he was the principal of a school, and so he can give you some ideas on what you can do as far as taking this foundation that you have here and expanding it and growing, and then basically expanding it to reach out to other people that can share. Like he was talking about the third person. There could be the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and so forth, of people that think and believe the same theory about sharing the growing of us as African people. It's very important to do that.
Thank you so much for answering our question.
Jessica, did you have something to add to it?
I was just going to add on to what was said and what you said as well about imagery. I'm thinking programming, if the same and messaging that we see about ourselves, and that I'm sorry, I'm in a public space at my office, and hold on one second. I'm on a call, sorry, it's a webinar, so I can't. I got it. So that's why I said it's very important for you to safeguard your mental health, because if you don't have a stable foundation of who you are, you can be told anything. You can be programmed to believe anything about yourself if you are consistently watching images of yourself. And this is why I have a beauty, I also have a beauty business, because this images, again, the same messages are being told that you're not beautiful, you're not worthy, you're not valuable. In many ways, it's told to us. So we have to be able to counteract that. We have to be able to help ensure that the children that we are responsible for, that we give them different alternate messaging, that people know who they are. And once you start to know who you are and really stand strong in that, you will, it's like a protection against just anything coming in and telling you, otherwise. You're like, no, I'm not, I'm intelligent, I'm worthy, I know my history, or I know who I am, I know how powerful I am. Then you'll be stronger against that. But as many people here have mentioned already, efforts are made to destroy that, or to give you something else, so that you can then be more controlled. If I consistently show you an image of yourself in a negative way, you will start to believe that. So the stronger you are, the less likely it be to impact you. And there's so many levels that I don't like to talk very negatively, but I'm just speaking facts. There are many ways that we are, I feel, attacked. Media is one. There's so many other ways. So we have to really start taking control of what we can, being aware of what it is, and then working really hard to counteract that and interrupt it and introduce something new and better.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. I think Zainab has a question. Zainab?
Yes, I do have a question. I'm just gonna get in my car really quick, okay? Okay. First, I just want to say I thank everyone who's just been imparting so much wisdom on this call, because I really feel like it's been edifying for me as a young person, as a young Black woman, as a young person in general. And my question is for everyone, everyone who spoke, all of the leaders, I would call you guys. I'm trying, for me during this quarantine, it's been especially trying because I feel as though my mental health and my spiritual health and my emotional health and my physical health have all been kind of like attacked. So it's so good to hear that there's someone on here who's into fitness, who has a fitness program or fitness company. I'm sorry. And anyway, what I'm trying to say is that if there's any like educated resources that have helped you throughout your youth, this is open to anyone to help answer. Please share it in the chat or talk about it if you can, because I find it so hard to find information that's actually like honest and truthful. I think a lot of things are so skewed by like hate that I don't get to actually hear something that's beneficial for me as someone who just wants to learn, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's my question. Any knowledge, any resources, if anyone knows?
Well, I would suggest, for me, I started with listening to tapes of Malcolm X and watching videos. You now have YouTube. You don't need VHS tapes. You know, just find out who are the scholars, who are the heroes. I mean, we're in the information age. You can look them up, and then you can also get involved with different organizations and find out what they're like. Not saying you have to be committed to them, but find out different organizations and find your fit. I could recommend the African Village Research and Cultural Center, which I'm a part of, and Minister Wells is in leadership, and we constantly have these conversations, just to educate one another, you know, and constantly share this information, and that's where it starts. Each one teach one, at least from my perspective. But I don't want to take all the time.
What was it called? I want to write it down. I don't have a pen, and I don't want to exit, and then the Zoom call cuts off.
Let me just put it in the chat for you.
Research and culture.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
just stick it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll text it in the chat for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
I also had a group called Party, Parents Actively Reclaiming Their Youth, and one of the things we did is we would always have in-house study where we would get a book by an African-centered scholar like Professor Tony Browder. We definitely read Dr. Joy DeGruy, so many other authors that dealt with our African identity, not just being Black, because that's so broad, but those of us who deal with our African identity. And we would study them, and then we would go out and do what was called field research, and we would go to different museums. We go to the Schomburg Research and Cultural Center. We go to the Great Blacks and Wax Museum. We would go to the African American Smithsonian Museum of History. Like, you just have to visit all of these places of higher learning, go to lectures at the local colleges. You'd be surprised of how the information is just all around you. But if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know what you're looking at. But I'll pass the mic to Dr. DeLacy.
Okay.
You're just gonna give me some work to do, huh, Brother Pat?
It's light work, though. Light work.
I was gonna stick my readings that I just gave to some young folks, and actually some Caucasian children that reached out to me who wanted to learn more about the Black experience. And so I says, I think that we can teach you by giving you a reading list. And I gave them about 150 books on the list. So I'll figure out how to get it to Minister Vernon and share it with you, because that will take you all over the place. In fact, I'm going to see, because I literally just pulled it up, and I just want to share some of it, because obviously Dr. Joy DeGruy is one of them, of course. But let me just grab some of it real quick. I'm going to see if I can share it. Let me just see.
Excited.
Yeah, I see you getting excited over there. So here we go, right? You can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
And just to give you an idea, and I won't go through all of it, right? But African history. So we've got Dr. Ben Yosef, right? We just talked about Dr. John Henry Clark, Sheikh Anta Diop, Chancellor Williams, J.A. Rogers, Anthony Browder, Ivan Van Sertima. Then African-American history, Lerone Bennett. They came before Columbus, John Henry Clark, Malefi Asante, who was right here in Philadelphia, Malana Karenga. All of this, and I'll share this list with you, Frederick Douglass, W. Du Bois, Alex Haley, John Henry Clark again, Carter G. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro, Asa Hilliard. Like, literally, these are the kinds of writings and readings that I did to get motivated. A Black Parent's Handbook to Educating Your Children Outside of the Classroom by Rudy Kafele, who's all over the place. He's the one that taught me how to become a principal, and he's right here in East Orange, New Jersey. Positive African Images for Children, Social Studies, right? African American Children, a Self-Empowering Approach to Modifying Behavior. All of this is available to us. And as Brother Tad said, I mean, and it goes on. And so I'm sharing this kind of literature with white kids that want to learn about your experience. So I'll make it available to you. Just give it to you so you have it. And that's where you start your journey. And you can pick and choose which sections of it you want to be reading. But for me, those were the things that opened the doors for me. I'm fortunate because I live in Newark, New Jersey. So I got to grow up here with Amiri Baraka right here in Newark. And I
Get
could
out!
Yeah.
I love Amiri Baraka.
So I could sit at the house on 10th Street and listen to him and his wife recite poetry, or sit us there for 4 or 5 hours and talk to us. Or when I went there as a Black police officer, because RAS at that time was running a group called Black Nia Force, and I was running Black Cops Against Police Brutality. And to the point that we make about being in different places, they hated cops, and I was a cop, and we're from the same city. So they challenged me to come to one of their Saturday sessions. I went there on a Saturday by myself. They stopped me at the door, the 2 security brothers, and said, you can't come in with your gun. You got to put your gun in the car. I went and took my gun in the car. They then took me down in the laundry room and said, stand on one leg. We're going to search you. And if you come off that one leg, we're going to flip you and beat you down because we can't stand pigs. So they searched me. Then they said, now switch legs. And if you come off that leg, we're going to flip you and beat you down because we can't stand pigs. Then they let me sit down, and I'm in a basement by myself, no gun, no backup, filled with Black people, young Black people, and they're talking and giving a lecture. So whenever I raise my hand like you all are doing now to speak, and I was only about 30 years old, the guy next to me would look at me and say, what you gonna say? Because I can't stand pigs. And I would ask my question and we would talk. And I'd ask another question and he'd say, I can't stand pigs. So by the third time I was gonna ask a question, I looked at him first and said, you know, I know you can't stand pigs, and me either. I don't eat pig. So would you let me answer my question? Now that's how we started. But that's what I thought every Black officer should go through, so that you learn to be humble in your community. I walk my neighborhood. One of the other things that helps my mental health, or as my kids say, my mental, is that I walk the neighborhood. I'm up at 5:30 every morning walking 3 miles. And I walk in the hood. I speak to the drug dealers. They speak to me. They don't sell drugs on the 4 corners where I own a house. I simply say, brothers, you know, you got to give me this corner. I don't let the police beat you down and put drugs on you. You can't sell on the corner where I pay taxes. They're like, you got it, brother, no problem. And they go to the next corner. A couple of weeks ago when George Floyd occurred, a hospital in my neighborhood, the CEO reached out and asked me to come there and talk to the entire hospital about race and racism in George Floyd. I went walking in a suit and tie 4 blocks from the house. I walked by the drug dealers 2 blocks down on the corner and said, good afternoon, brothers. They're like, where are you going, Brother DeLacy, walking in a suit and tie? I tell them what I'm going to do. They say, well, if you want to protest, let us know. We'll be there with you because we know you're a good brother. Now, my point is that I had to learn how to love Black people. I had to learn not to take the European approach to policing in my own community. I greet you with respect. When we ran the charter school, it was an African-themed charter school, kindergarten to 6th grade. When I redirected young people because they were misbehaving, I got down on my knees and talked to them eye level, lowered my tone so that they didn't see this big person correcting them. There's all sorts of things that we can learn here. And it's all right there. And the elders are right here available to you. You're right here, Sister Jessica. I listened to her. You got Minister Vernon. You got Brother Tad. You got Sister Jane. I mean, it's all right here. This is, as I was telling Sister Fatima, about not being discouraged and not being disappointed, because it's all right here. This is the combination of what we need to move our community forward.
Ashe.
Ashe. Yes.
We could go on and on, but we're nearing the end. We have 3 more minutes.
Wow.
I want to thank, yes.
Time through.
Dr. DeLacy wanted to be in only 1 hour, so 4 to 5. So I was surprised that he's still on, because he gave us 1 hour from his busy schedule. I know he's, oh my God, I'm so thankful to you all. I learned so much, and I'm sure others did. my takeaway from this is that we must take hold of our mental health to know when to switch off from social media, from the news, so that we can compartmentalize, so that we can breathe. And because if we go on looking at what is going on, what is being done to our kind, and not knowing when it will end, it will drive us crazy. So we need to know when to switch off, to breathe, to get some air. And also knowing that we have to work together as a community, being able to pick one another up, to mentor to our young ones, so that they can be better than us, make better and be ready to take, like Dr. DeLacy said, we're getting old. The future belongs to them. So we must do our best to make sure that our youth, they are ready to take the baton, to equip them, to empower them, to encourage them. And also for our youth to listen, to pay attention, to know they will not always be young. They are going to have children who they are going to worry about their future. So if they do the work now, there will be less worry for them, for their children. Please, I want to thank each and every one of you who logged in. And please, if anybody has something to say, please, the floor is open. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jane, for doing this. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And protect your mental health.
We'll be posting on the page the links that you sent us. We'll probably even like show clips of videos of this video.
Okay. If you need me to send any more links over, just let me know and I'll send it.
Yes, I'm going to send you guys the recording. Unfortunately, we were going to stream live on Facebook, but somehow I got afraid that I might mess up, because this is my first Zoom meeting. So I kind of got scared and I didn't stream again on Facebook, so I don't mess that I will send the recording to you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the book list, the book list that I get from Dr. DeLacy, I will send to you, Tad. Okay. And you can disseminate. Okay, no problem.
Thank you so much.
Can Jane post the book list on your page?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So family, you all take care. I'm gonna go get me something to eat.
That's what I was doing.
And I gotta finish working.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.